The William Patterson Broadcast Network, Brave New Radio.
Brave New Radio. Give us your tired, your poor, your hungry, your rockers, your punks, your freaks, your geeks, your Greeks, your party animals, your gangsters, your commuters, your residents, your students, your alums, your lawyers, your truckers, your calls, your tweets. And we'll give you rock, classic, indie, punk, alternative, easy, hard, raps, rhymes, mixes, and drops. We'll give you kick-ass music because we're WPSC 88.7 FM, Brave New Radio. Sound good?
The views and opinions expressed on this show are solely those of the hosts and guests and are not necessarily supported by WP 88.7 FM, station management, or the station owner, William Patterson University. Anyone wanting to offer differing opinions may do so by calling this show at 973-720-2738. Abusive callers will be rejected. Now here's your program on WP 88.7 FM, Brave New Radio.
Well, good morning, good morning. Good morning to you, and it is a wonderful morning indeed as we have arisen once again. We have that thing called life, and if you can hear the sound of my voice, then you're listening to another edition of the Reading Circle, as this is your host, none other than Marc Medley. We come to you live on Saturday mornings from 6 o'clock to 7 o'clock. Actually, it's from 6 to 9, and I have the flexibility of what I do within those 3 hours in the format. And this morning we have a Reading Circle double header. My first guest is already on the line. She's waiting in the wings. So we will get started with our morning ritual and routine. Those of you who've been listening for any amount of time, you know what that ritual and routine is. I will share the weather with you. I will read from 2 books. Since it is the Reading Circle, I will read passages from 2 books as our inspirational moment. And then I will introduce my guests, share some information with you, and then our interview will be underway. So if I were in the classroom, I have just given you our objective for the morning, or given you our agenda. I'll let you know what's to expect in the next couple of minutes. So without further ado, I'm going to go right ahead and do just what I just told you I'm going to do. The weather right here in the northern New Jersey is 32.2 degrees. We are working our way up to an Indian summer high of 53 today, dropping back tonight to a low of 30. We expect abundant sunshine and clear skies tonight. Then tomorrow on Sunday, sunny, high near again 55. Moving back to a low of 32, sunny during the day, partly cloudy skies during the evening, and then on Monday, 54 as a high, 32 as a low, sunshine during the day, overcast during the night, partly cloudy skies on Tuesday, partly cloudy again Tuesday night, 47 as a high, 30 as a low. Then on Wednesday, a mix of clouds and sun early, then becoming cloudy later in the day, high of 49, low of 36. Those clouds are going to remain on Wednesday night. That is the weather brought to you right here from the WP 88.7 FM Weather Center. That is our weather, and now we're going to move right on into our morning readings that we kicked the show off with. The morning readings are to do none other than to motivate and to inspire, not to proselytize, not to try to convert, not to try to do any of that, but they do give a positive message. And as I read from these books on Saturday mornings, the rest of the mornings just flow. So out of the book, The Power of Being Thankful, December 5th, The Importance of Faith. But without faith, it is impossible to please and be satisfactory to Him, for whoever would come near to God must believe necessarily that God exists and that He is the rewarder of those who earnestly and diligently seek Him out. Faith is a powerful force that we have access to and should be very thankful for. When we live by faith, we release God to do amazing things for us and through us. Faith is the leaning of the entire human personality on God in absolute confidence in his power, wisdom, and goodness. We can come to God in childlike faith, simply believing his word and placing our faith in him to do what he has promised. Some people say that they have no faith, but that is not true. We all have faith, but we may not choose to put it in God. When you sit in a chair, you have faith that it will hold you up. When you deposit money in the bank, you have faith that you will be able to get it back when you need it. What or whom are you placing your faith in? I urge you not to put your faith in something unstable and shaky, but put it in God, who is a solid rock and never changes. He is faithful and will always do what he promises to do. The prayer of thanks. Father, I am thankful that you have given me a measure of faith. I release my faith in you and trust you to always meet my needs and take care of me. Thank you for your goodness and your love. From the book Until Today by Iyanla Vanzant for December the 5th, she says, I will know peace when I learn to forgive myself. It can be challenging to forgive someone. The hardest person to forgive may be you. Considering what you know about yourself and what you are capable of, there are times when you cannot forgive things you have done. At times, it is hard to believe that you can forgive yourself, that you deserve to be forgiven, or that you are worthy of forgiveness. For some reason, you mistakenly believe that to forgive means to allow or to say it is okay. Most of us will never allow ourselves to make a mistake without being punished. It is cruel and unnecessary to punish yourself for being human. As human beings, our growth, learning, and healing are always at stake. Forgiveness fosters all three. Each of your actions is motivated either by something you are ready to receive or something you are ready to release. Detrimental or dishonorable actions usually mean that you are ready to release something. Some false, limiting, or unloving belief. Some unreasonable fear. Your actions will demonstrate how and why the belief or fear no longer serves you. Your actions will demonstrate where you need to grow, what you are ready to learn, or what you are ready to heal. When you forgive yourself for believing you deserve to be punished, growth occurs. Learning takes place and healing is the result. Punishment rarely fosters learning. In fact, it is the precursor to control. When you forgive yourself, you release fear, eliminating the possibility that fear will continue to control your behavior. Until today, you may have found that it was very difficult to forgive yourself for certain behaviors you have engaged in or certain actions you have taken. Just for today, be willing to grow, learn, and heal yourself. Prepare yourself to release the fear that controls your mind. Forgive yourself. Today, I am devoted to creating a divine growing, learning, and healing opportunity with self-forgiveness. That's from the book Until Today by Iyanla Vanzant. And now is the time that we have all come together for. I am going to introduce my guest, who, as I said, she is on the line, called in right on time, and that is Dr. Ruby Payne. She's actually Ruby K. Payne, Ph.D., is the founder of AHA Process, an author, speaker, publisher, and career educator, recognized internationally for a framework for understanding poverty, her foundational book and workshop. Dr. Ruby Payne has helped students and adults of all economic backgrounds achieve academic, professional, and personal success. As an expert on the mindsets of economic classes and overcoming the hurdles of poverty, she has trained hundreds of thousands of professionals, from educators and school administrators to community, church, and business leaders. Dr. Ruby Payne is available for keynote presentations at conferences and trainings in schools, communities, business, etc. for half and full day events, and she has presented to groups in more than 10 countries and every state in the United States. Payne founded AHA Process in 1996 to offer a broad range of training solutions, workshops, consulting, books, and trainings for K-12, higher education, and communities, with a focus on creating sustainable success for everyone. We welcome to the Reading Circle microphones Dr. Ruby K. Payne. Dr. Payne, good morning.
Good morning.
I am thrilled, as I said prior to us going on the air, to have you on the show, because the topic, particularly for those of us in education, but for the world in general, is such an important topic, because poverty drives so many things. So for you to study that and then to be able to share out what you've learned from it, I believe is so important, and that's why I was so happy that you agreed to join us on the show today. So good morning again to you.
Good morning.
And I'm going to share some information with the listening audience. Listening audience, you know what to do. You are to get on all your social media sites and on your telephones and text folks, and you let folks know that they are to get up, tune in to gobrave.org anywhere around the world as we stream there. And if they're in the northern New Jersey area, they can catch us on FM radio, WP 88.7 FM. So I'll tell you what, you do that while I share this information with you, and then we will come right back and get on with our interview.
So slowly.
After a few drinks, I'm taking it slow.
Well, you're not fooling the cop behind you.
What?
Get ready to pay in 0.1 miles.
Getting pulled over for buzz driving could cost you around $10,000 in fines, legal fees, and increased insurance rates. Nothing kills a buzz like getting pulled over for buzz driving, because buzz driving is drunk driving. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
If you own a gun, you have a full-time responsibility. When you aren't using it, be sure it can't get into the hands of curious children, troubled teenagers, a thief, or anyone else who might misuse it. Your family, friends, and neighbors are all counting on you. Remember, always, lock it up. For more information on firearms storage safety, visit ncpc.org. This message brought to you by the National Crime Prevention Council, the Bureau of Justice Assistance, and the Ad Council.
Think carrying 10 or 20 pounds of extra weight isn't much? We went to a park, handed 10 and 20-pound sandbags to people aged 45 to 60, and asked if we could follow them around.
10 pounds makes a big difference. Oh, I definitely felt it in my knees.
A few extra pounds each year can cause joint pain and lead to serious chronic diseases like diabetes and heart disease. Wouldn't you like to drop that weight and stop picking up more? Visit hhs.gov/1 pound at a time to find out how. Obesity happens 1 pound at a time. So does preventing it. Brought to you by HHS and NIH.
Welcome back to the Reading Circle with your host, Marc Medley. As I shared with you prior to me sharing that information with you, my guest this morning is Dr. Ruby K. Payne, and she has dedicated much of her life's work to helping others understand poverty and its impact, particularly on children and in education. So, Dr. Payne, what drove you or what caused you to take on that area of study?
Well, it was mean it. I explained what happened. He said, Ruby, she means it. So what are you going to do about it? So that's when I started to learn about the realities of high poverty neighborhoods, some of the things you have to know that you might not know. And then I was in the school business for 22 years. And I often tell this story, people get it. I wouldn't have done anything with the work, okay, with the understandings. But I had a principal come to me, and she said, Ruby, you've got to help me with my building. She said, I'm having so many problems, discipline problems. She said, that's... So it'll kind of it'll tell you how the book got written, okay?
No, go ahead.
She was so angry about her data, and I said, look, tell me your data, what your data says. And she said, well, it doesn't help. She said, we're just having lots of discipline problems, and I don't know why. I said, well, tell me a story. She said, all right. She said, I'm mad about this. I said, okay, so what is it? She said, well, because I'm the director of professional development. She said, I got 2 sets of twins in the building. They got 2 sets of clothing. They wear one set one day, one set the next. So I said, I'll give you $200 for the holidays for clothes. Ask your mother if that's okay. Mother said yes. Girls came back after the holidays with the same clothes. And so she called one of the little girls in. She said, what happened? And the little girl said, well, we never had a DVD player. We bought one. And I said to the principal, you know, if I was the mother, I would have done that too. And she said, but Ruby, they need those clothes. I said, did they ask you for them? And she said, no. I said, so how'd you decide? She's having so much difficulty. I said, look, you know, poverty's painful, and one of your priorities for your money is entertainment. It takes away the pain. And I said, sometimes you'll pay your cable bill before you pay your rent.
That's right.
And she said, but she was having so much difficulty understanding it. I told her a story from wealth, because my former husband, Frank, had worked in the Chicago Board of Trade for several years as a bond trader, so we ended up being thrown in with very wealthy people, you know.
Right.
And I said, look, I was in this woman's home on the North Shore of Chicago. The woman at that time had an income of $6 million a year, and she's a very angry woman and a bitter woman because she believes she's poor. She knew somebody had a yacht, and she didn't. You know, I read this article. It said if you want to understand sailing and yachting or boating, all you have to do is stand in a cold shower and tear up $100 bills, you know? Well, this woman had a piece of art on her wall that I recognized as a Picasso. And I said, ooh, that looks like a Picasso. I learned if you want to insult someone in wealth, all you have to do is infer their artwork is a replica, you know? Anyway, I said to this principal, this is the question I asked the principal. I said, look, if somebody gave you a $1.4 million piece of art, what would you do with it? She immediately said, sell it. I said, yes, you would, because you'd be thinking, I lived this long without this piece of art. I'll bet I can live some more.
Right.
And I said, that's what the girls are thinking about their clothes. And so then she asked me, why do they laugh when they're disciplined? And several questions. And so I ended up writing the book because of it, because people were wanting information all the time, and I just couldn't take all the phone calls. So that's how the whole thing started.
I'm looking here in the first chapter when you said typically poverty is thought of in terms of financial resources only. However, the reality is that financial resources, while very important, do not explain the differences in the success with which some individuals leave poverty, nor the reasons that many stay in poverty. The ability to leave poverty is more dependent on other resources than it is on financial resources. Each of these resources plays a vital role in the success of an individual, and then you go on to explain these various resources. Talk a little bit about, one, your definition of poverty, and then talk a little bit about in terms of the various other resources other than financial, because you're correct. People immediately leap to just money when we start talking poverty, overlooking the other areas or resources that also are impacted.
Well, we have started defining poverty as the extent to which you don't have these 9 resources. What happens when people don't have resources? Their reality gets destabilized, okay? So the more unstable your reality, the more you live every day in crisis. Okay? So if you don't, for example, have emotional resources, if you engage in destructive behaviors, you know, violence, drugs, etc., the bottom line is it will destabilize your reality, okay? And so what we say is, the fewer the resources you have. So we look at financial, mental, can you read and write? Emotional, can you stay out of destructive behaviors? Physical, does your body work? Can you take care of yourself? I have a 21-year-old nephew. He can't feed himself, okay? Another resource is spiritual. Do you have hope for the future? Do you believe that there's divine guidance out there? And can you... It's not religious, it's spiritual, okay?
Right.
Like, for example, I was talking to this 18-year-old boy, and I said to him, tell me what your life will be like when you're 25. And he said, I'll be dead.
Wow.
And I said, how do you know that? He said, everybody like me is dead.
Wow.
So if you think you're going to be dead at 25, there's really no point in learning. There's really no point in working, okay? The next resource is support system. Do you have family and friends that can help you? In other words, this is the biggest resource that stable households have. They don't even know they have it because we don't assign it financial value, you know?
Right.
It's things like transportation. It's things like child care. You have somebody to take your child when there's an emergency. It's things like, I'll say to an audience, do you have somebody you call and whine to when you're unhappy and they don't charge you, you know? It's all these things that stabilize your reality. Then the next one is relationships and role models. Do you have anybody who cares about you, and do you care about anybody? Now, I'll ask kids that. Those two questions will tell you more about a child's reality than anything else.
That's right.
And who do you care the most about? And you're listening for an adult, because if there is no adult there, it's going to be very difficult, okay? And then the last one is formal. There's two more. Formal registered. Do you know the language of work? And then the last one is, do you know the hidden rules?
Right.
Environments, just let me say a little bit about hidden rules, because the critics have gone after this one because they don't like it, because they think it's stereotypical, but it's just patterns people use. I'll just say to an audience, have you ever been in a social setting that was so uncomfortable you couldn't wait to leave? Okay. And if you have, then there's hidden rules that
right.
They're unarticulated. They tell people whether they belong or not, but they're not articulated.
Correct. You can feel it with the body language or the vibe or the facial expressions or what have you. Yes, they are there.
And we have them by race and by class and by religion. I'll say to an audience, have you ever been to a new church and stood up at the wrong time? You know?
Right. Absolutely right. Because you don't know the protocols.
Yeah.
You're right.
And nobody articulates it, you know?
Right. Along those same lines, right after that chapter, you get into a little quiz. And I tell you, that quiz blew me away. As soon as I got the book, I had the staff take it. I said, we're going through this as a group. I want everybody to take this quiz and go through each one of those. And there was something, because, while I didn't necessarily grow up in poverty per se, we were not rich either. And then as I became older and moved into the work world, I moved higher up within middle class, if you will. But still, as I went through the various things that was on the quiz, there were some of these things that blew my mind. And I mean, in terms of, let's see, I know how to live.
Example.
I know how to live without electricity and a phone. There was another one was, about being able to go. I know which grocery stores have dumpsters where I can get discarded food and the best times to go. There was another one here about the pharmaceuticals, something about going to, I know when Walmart, drugstores, and convenience stores throw away over-the-counter medicines with expired dates. And those are just things like you just said. I just never thought of that there are people who actually have strapped her in order for them to fulfill their needs.
Absolutely. And see, those things, if you're in because there's some differences between urban and rural extreme poverty, and I make a distinction between generational and situational. Generational being 2 generations or more, and situational is when there's a job loss, a divorce, a health issue, resources are temporarily reduced.
So as you go through the quiz, you have, could you survive middle class? And I like the way you posed the question. Could you survive in poverty? Could you survive in middle class? And I believe the third one is, could you survive in wealth? And I had to laugh as I got through the wealth, because see, most of the middle class stuff I could truly relate to. Most of that I've done or either are doing. But this, in at least 3 languages. I know go, middle class as well. I have at least 2 residents that are staffed and maintained. And there was one here, something about I know my favorite restaurants in 3 different countries. And I just had to laugh. So, okay, can't relate. I've been to different countries, but I don't know my different restaurants there. So when people take the quiz, what has kind of like been your feedback, or have folks talked about their experiences with the quiz?
Well, what they want to do is they want to make one better than another.
Right. That makes sense.
I've just said, no, they're different. They're not. I said, if we would have a war tomorrow and we were all put back into survival, we'd have to follow those rules, It's something that really much shapes and comes out of environment.
Right.
Like the one that one of the audiences has the most trouble with, one of them they have trouble with in the well is the thing about I know how to screen and not meet people I don't want to meet. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
One of the biggest issues you have in wealth, if you've been there 2 generations or more, and I distinguish wealth as anybody who's in the top 1% of net worth in the U.S., which is in the U.S. net worth is $7.8 million in assets or more. Okay? And so you're in the top 1% of income if you have $394,000 a year in income gross. Okay?
Right.
But net worth is a different ballgame. And one of the things that happens is that your biggest problem when you have that kind of net worth is personal safety. Because you have to protect yourself a lot because people want to get to know you, okay? And not always because it's you. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And so one of the things... See, the big axis that people live off of is time and resources.
Correct.
The one way... Okay. But how you do your resources, particularly, is that axis of time and resources how you stabilize your environment. And one of the things that happens in wealth, your problem is you have too many resources, and you can't take care of them by yourself.
Right.
You pay people to help you, and that makes you vulnerable at a personal safety level. So it leads to a hidden rule. Among the truly wealthy, you don't introduce yourself when you go to a party. Okay. You are introduced. And they'll say your connection. Okay. This is Marc Medley, with the reading circle. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so you are introduced. But on the other side, if they don't introduce you, if they just say, this is my very dear friend, and I've been introduced that way, that means I like her, but she got no connections.
Okay.
And so be careful. And so the thing of it is that if you go to a party among the middle class, though, and you don't introduce yourself, then you're rude and a snob.
Correct.
So the point is that different environments stress different issues because of survival in that environment.
If you have just joined us, my esteemed guest is Dr. Ruby K. Payne, and she is the author of A Framework for Understanding Poverty, and it's actually gone through several editions. Matter of fact, the one I have is the 5th edition. It's gone through several editions because the work is that important, and that's why we're talking about it this morning. I'm going to share some more information with you. You know what to do, and I mean get on all your social media sites because this discussion is extremely important, particularly, but not just if you're an educator, but particularly if you're an educator and particularly in an urban area. But as Dr. Payne just said, whether it's urban or rural, or suburban for that matter, there are issues. They may be different issues and maybe different environmental issues, but they're issues nonetheless. And where I want to go when we come back, when I join you again, is why is it so important, particularly for teachers and educators, to get a feel for where our children may be coming from, particularly if you're serving in an impoverished environment or an impoverished area. So I'm going to share this information with you. Get on all your social media sites and your phones. Text somebody. I don't care if you have to wake them up. Wake them up, because this one is that important. All right, so I'm going to share this with you, and then we will resume our interview.
I started going cold turkey. Well, at least when I'm in the car.
I know I shouldn't do it.
So hard to stop. That's why I hide it from myself, so I won't be tempted.
I used to do it all the time. I stopped by locking it in my glove compartment.
My friend used to do it way too much. Now I turn it off when we're in the car.
My solution is simple. I just don't do it. There are a lot.
Tell us at StopTextStopWrecks.org. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Hey, what's up? Thinking about you. XOXOXO. Want to snuggle. ... JK. Hit me back. You getting these texts? ? We should hang later. I miss you. Holla at ya, boy. Holla back. Holla back. Holla back. Are you at home? Where are you? What are you doing? OMG. You are making me mad. Are you with your ex? You better text me back. I'm waiting outside your house.
Remember, sending an angry robot to deliver your message. When does the robot become dangerous? Let us know at that'snotcool.com.
That'snotcool.com.
Brought to you by the Ad Council.
This is the Reading Circle with your host, Marc Medley. We're heard live each Saturday morning from 6 o'clock to 7 o'clock, and in some instances where we do a Reading Circle doubleheader, it may be from 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock, and a triple header will be 6 o'clock to 9 o'clock. Other than that, the format is usually our author interviews, and then we follow up with the gospel music. So if you're our first listener, welcome. May you become a regular listener. My guest this morning is Dr. Ruby K. Payne, author of A Framework for Understanding Poverty. And that's what we're talking about this morning in this first hour and a half and so, or how long ever it takes. I have at least until 7:30 before my next guest is scheduled to appear. Dr. Payne, this has been dubbed Education Saturday because I have you in the first hour and I have Dr. Barbara Blackburn at 7:30. Is going to talk about rigor in the classroom. So it's a very nice dovetail in terms of how we can get to rigor in the classroom. But prior to being able to do that, as educators, we kind of need to understand, or not kind of, we need to understand what our children go through before they even get to school. And poverty plays a big part in that. That's why I chose your book as one of our books. Actually, Barbara's book is also the second book we're doing as a book study. That's why I chose these two books this year to do book studies with, because I wanted to sensitize the staff even further than they were in terms of what our kids go through before they even come to school. And a lot of things on the poverty quiz list is exactly what our children go through prior to coming to school, and things streetwise or savvy-wise that they have learned, such as the going to the dumpster from the pharmaceuticals, or learning how to run to the dryer. You know, they can manipulate the dryer and the washing machine at the laundromat. So those are experiences that many of the teachers have not had. So they may not necessarily be able to relate to what the children are going through before they get to school. So that could be one of the reasons why when we're trying to teach 2 + 2 = 4, the child is not getting it, because they're thinking so much about all the other things that's going on prior to them getting to school. So how important is it for educators to really understand, particularly if they serve in an area that's impoverished, this whole notion of a child growing up in poverty?
Well, I like to tell this. I would like to use this story to illustrate the why it's problematic. It's not just till you're about 8 or 9 years old. The research is you store your early memories in your amygdala, and because you don't really have words to assign to it. And amygdala has an interesting memory. It's got a long-term memory for the feeling, but a short-term memory for the incident. Okay, so you'll act on it even though you don't know why. Like I'll say sometimes to individuals, have you ever done something and then you've looked at yourself and said, oh no, that was my mother again, that was my father again, you know? Well,
right.
So like I know this man, he's now quite wealthy, but he grew up very poor in the barrio of San Antonio. His mother, 4 sisters, no father. And he had a paper route when he was 7, and he saw a bicycle he really wanted. So he found out that bicycle was $40. So every week when he get paid, he'd keep $1 for himself and gave the rest of the money to his mother. Well, he had $40 saved. And he came home from school to buy the bicycle one day, and he went to where he was keeping his money, and the money was gone. And he went to his mother, and he said, "Have you seen my money?" And she said, "Yes, I took it." He said, "You took it?" She said, "Yes." She said, "Your sister was sick. I thought she was going to die. Took her to the doctor, bought her medicine with your money." Well, the next year in 3rd grade, his teacher was talking about math and why you need to understand math. And if you understand math, you'll be able to save your money, you'll be able to count your money, you'll be able to get ahead. And he said, "I still remember thinking to this day, that teacher is an absolute idiot. If she doesn't know what happens to you when you save your money, she probably doesn't understand math either, and I'm not going to learn it."
Wow. Now that's an interesting association.
Well, let me ask you this question, Mark. If you have to, if you have to choose between acting on information that you've experienced versus acting on information that you get from somebody you don't know very well, which one are you going to choose?
You're absolutely right. It's the experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a very good point. Very good point, because as I shared when I was setting up the question, many of the experiences that our children that we serve going through, many of us as the adults serving them have not had that experience.
Right.
And we may not be able to relate to why they may be. Now, like in the story that you just gave, a teacher would not know that in that child's mind, he's thinking back to when his money was taken and not focusing on the problem, the saving problem or the math problem. So the frustration would come in based on what the teacher said, "Well, I've taught this, I'm saying this, I've showed you the example, I've modeled for you, and you're still not getting it." And the kid, "Idiot, I saved my money was stolen, or I lost my money, so therefore that teacher doesn't know math either." And that's an interesting disconnect. And I know I'm a professor in terms of public speaking. And we get into this whole chapter about filters, how your audience may be filtering information based on, as you just said, experience. And for the public speaker, you may look in the audience and see somebody tuned out, and you think it's you, not realizing it's something that you said have triggered something that caused them to remember the experience.
Right, and so I'll say to audiences sometimes, teaching literally is outside the head, but learning is literally inside the head. And for that marriage to occur between the two environments requires that there's so many other things of poverty, like stressors and instability, no food, and all these other things. So even when those things are maybe addressed, you still have this whole world inside the head who they've had some very different experiences that shape their understanding of how the world works.
Well, I notice here in the book you says, "An understanding of the culture and values of poverty will lessen the anger and frustration that educators may periodically feel when dealing with these students and parents. Most of the students in poverty I have talked to don't believe they are poor, even when they're on welfare. Most of the wealthy adults I have talked to don't believe they're poor. Cite someone who has more than they do." And as we were just talking about, how do you kind of bridge that gap? Or to do in terms of information helps to bridge that. I mean, how as a teacher in a classroom that has 15, 20, 25 kids, that all of them may be coming out of impoverished homes, and you just said here they don't even realize they're poor. How do you deal with that?
Well, I do a couple things. Let me just say one thing. There's layers of hidden rules, too. There's layers by class. There's layers by race, okay? There's layers by urban and suburban, and rural. But what I'll say to staff is this: number one, analyze the resources of your students. In other words, I have a lot of staff members say, "Ruby, I have too many kids, particularly at secondary. I got 150 students, And I'll say, well, the research is that 90% of problems in a classroom come from about 10% of the students. Okay, so for those students, it's absolutely essential that you know about them and their thinking, And there's a lot of ways to find that out. But I recommend that one of the things we recommend in the classroom, we just address it point blank. We'll say, because what happens is people get angry. I've had so many teachers say to me, they don't have money for a field trip, but he's got the latest video game. He's got a $300 pair of Nikes. Don't get it, I don't have any sympathy for him. If he can have that stuff, then he can learn. And I'll go, wait a minute, okay? Look, and so I'll say, you have to look at, one of the hidden rules, and we have hidden rules by race, but one of the hidden rules in poverty is that money is shared. It's communal, okay? So you don't understand math, okay? Because the way in stable environments tend to teach math is with money.
Right.
Well, in generational poverty, you spend your money when you get it, because if you don't, tomorrow somebody's going to ask if they can borrow your food card or whatever, and you have to say yes.
Right. It's interesting
because trade environment. Huh?
Right. It's interesting because you're talking about kind of like the unspoken or the hidden rules, if you will, within the various environments. And one of the things, and you talked about it earlier, that really stuck with me, and you just said it with because that is a teacher lament. I don't understand. You can't spend 25 cents for a pencil, but you have a $125 pair of Jordans on. And yes, we hear that, and I've said it myself all the time. But that whole thing that you brought up about entertainment, because we don't have the accoutrements of the various levels, whether it's middle class or for, therefore the priority now becomes, like you said, the feel good or the entertainment. Now that stuck with me as I read. That was one thing that leaped out at me in the book and said, oh my God, she is so right, because they're looking for the immediate pleasure because they don't have the other things that other groups, whether it's the upper middle class or the wealth class, may have. That's something I think that really needs to be impressed upon in terms of priorities, because many times I'll speak with staff or they'll speak with me and we're like, we don't understand why these folks don't prioritize. Like, education should be a number one priority, and it's not. But back to what you were saying, your point on the entertainment value, that rang true and made a lot of sense for me. Talk a little bit about, because you touched on it earlier. Let's blow that out a little bit further.
Okay, let me, and I'm going to blow it out this way. But before I forget to say this, is that the way we teach it to kids is we say, do you use the same rules in football that you do in basketball? And they'll go, no. And I'll go, why not? And they'll go, you lose. And I'll go, that's right. So there's rules for school and work. They're pretty much the same. There's rules outside of that. They're different. You use the rules that are going to help you survive in the environment. But this entertainment thing, like I said, it goes back to that time resource access. And what people in stable environments do around the world, and I really don't care where you are, they spend their time and money on three things: work, achievement, and material security. So what people do in stable households is they go to work. That's what they do with their time. They go to school so they can have better courses, so they can have a better job. And they buy things that turn into an asset, like a mortgage, okay? And they have 4 rules about money. Number 1, I don't ask you for money, and you don't ask me. Number 2, if you borrow, you have to what?
Pay it back.
Yep. Number 3, you never quit a job until?
You have another one.
Exactly. 4, do you tell people your salary?
No.
No. And so those rules right there help you keep your environment stable. Okay. But if you've been in poverty, where the resources are very unpredictable and scarce, then after 2 generations of that, you make your decisions against survival, entertainment, and relationships, because people keep you alive, not work.
Right.
My brother in Ohio, he went from a very stable to a very unstable environment in 10 years. He lost his farm in the 1980s because farming was brutal then. Then he got sick. They had a handicapped child, severely handicapped, so that knocked a wage earner out. Then my brother got sick, and he didn't go to the doctor, so he's got a degenerative neurological disease now that simply cannot be contained. He can't work, and now he has prostate cancer, and he's dying. Okay, so I pay for where he lives. I give him several $100s a month. My sister gives him cash. My brother buys him gas.
Right.
Pays the utilities. Okay, but he what keeps him alive are people.
Right.
okay? And when people become your possession, then the rules change. So what happens is entertainment then takes away the pain, and people stabilize your reality. So that's why in generational poverty, parents fear their children getting too educated. Because when children get too educated, they leave. And in poor white neighborhoods, they say you're getting above your raisins, you're too big for your britches. Poor African-American neighborhoods, they call them Oreos. Poor Hispanic neighborhoods, they call them coconuts. Poor Asian neighborhoods, they call them bananas. Poor Native American Indian neighborhoods, they call them apples. Red on the outside and white on the inside. Situational poverty will encourage their children to get educated. Generational poverty is equated with loss.
Wow. So, okay, explain the difference between situational poverty and generational poverty. I think it sounds like what you said with your brother just now was situational.
Right. But now he was situational. Job loss, illness, a handicapped child, a multiplicity of things. But generational is when your parents lived, your grandparents lived in in poverty, and you do too. Do you know what I mean?
I do. As a matter of fact, my question to that would be, how do you, and again, back to the school that I serve, that's one of the things we discuss as well. How do you break that? How do you break out of that cycle, particularly with the names that you just said you're called? And you are absolutely correct. I mean, in terms of, I've heard even as a child myself, people tell me you talk white, you speak white, and so forth and so on. So how do you break the generational poverty?
Okay. Well, let me just say one thing about you talk white. What we say to kids is this: no, that's green talk. That's fun. Like a friend of mine who teaches in Dallas, he teaches second language kids. He tells them this is how you get money from the gringos. So we just tell them, no, babe, that's green talk. But the three things that will move you out of poverty are education, employment, okay, and relationships, meeting people different than you are, social bridging capital. And the 4 reasons that people will leave are, number 1, it's too painful to stay. Number 2, you have a special talent or skill. Number 3, you have a goal or a vision, you got a future story. And number 4, you have a key relationship. Okay, if you want people to move out of poverty, then they have to have social bridging capital. They have to know somebody different than they are. They have to, because that person teaches them hidden rules. Okay. The second thing you have to have is you have to have that education piece. See, and one of the things that just inside here, we do a lot of community work, and I know that you know with the Baltimore poverty that just erupted, and with the let's take Baltimore. In the last 20 years, there's hundreds of $1 million been put in that community.
Yes.
Money alone money doesn't change thinking.
That's correct.
The problem. Money gets you past survival, but money doesn't change thinking. And there's Stanford Social Review Innovations magazine stated that there's 2 kinds of approaches to poverty. One is technical and one is cognitive. Technical is when you get better housing, you get better, you do job skill training, that kind of thing. With technical interventions, you get faster results, more measurable results. People like it because they show they're making a difference, but it doesn't last. If you want stuff to last, the change to last, then you have to do cognitive, which is you have to provide the education piece.
As you were talking, and I always let my guests know, I'm on the social media sites while we're on the air, and I'm on Twitter, and I've quoted 3 of the things that you've said recently. The last couple of minutes, teaching is outside of the head and learning is inside of the head. 3 things that will lead you out of poverty is education, employment, and relationships. And money does not change thinking. And all those are tied to you and on my Twitter site. So those of you who are listening in the audience, my Twitter site is Reading Circle 01. You'll see the quotes there. And we're talking poverty this morning and the impact it has really in life. And we were just talking about how we can break the generational gap. But that paradox is a crazy conundrum in terms of we are constantly preaching and teaching and sharing how the importance of education is the way out. Education is your key. Education is your ticket out, or at least your ticket into the next level. And it really is, or at least it appears to be, because I'm not sure if it's as hard of a sell as we think it is, because my experience has been a lot of times when we think the families, the children and the parents aren't listening, they are. And I think one of those hidden rules you were talking about is I can't let you know that I'm listening to you. I can't let you know that I'm taking what you're telling me in. But ultimately, a little bit further down the road, we do see that some of the stuff that we're saying is being received. And case in point is at the end of the year, usually when we're doing graduation practice, there might be a break in the practice, and I'll tell the kids, you know what, just for fun, you have the opportunity to imitate anybody you want in the building, including myself as the principal. And Dr. Payne, when I tell you the kids can imitate us to the letter in terms of our voice, in terms of our walk, in terms of our body movements, they're not listening to us. In some respects, they really are. And I've had kids come back years later and tell me, remember when you told me such and such? So I don't know if that's one of the hidden rules or not, that it's just not cool for me to show that I'm listening to an authority figure in that particular level of what. But in some respects, I do think they are getting. But that is a message that for us seems like it's a very hard sell. How do you get that across, that education is your way out? Particularly when you said earlier that in each group, they feel like now you've gotten beyond us.
Yes. And I want to say, remind me before the show's over, I need to say a little bit about race issues and poverty, okay? But the bottom line on the thing is when the issue is that I am convinced that we have a program called Getting Ahead in a Getting By World where we provide knowledge to adults. We've trained now between 40 and 50,000 adults in poverty. We tell them, you're a problem solver. You have to be to survive your reality. We just don't think you get the same information that other people get. And it's a facilitated thing with 12 people at a time. We pay them to come learn, and the bottom reason we pay them is this. You find me one professional that doesn't get their salary paid while they get training paid for, okay? And what we say is we just say, this is information other people have. You may or may not have gotten it, and we'd like you to have it. And we teach them about hidden rules. We teach them about language. They do a resource analysis of themselves. We talk about predators. We talk about community resources, and they analyze them. And at the end, they come up with a future story for themselves as a parent. And what happens, it totally changes how they parent their children. Because they'll say, hey, I have a future story now. You better get one, okay? And so the reason that becomes critical is this. When a kid gets in middle school, I just finished a book for American middle level education. When they get into middle school, puberty totally takes over. And the research is that if you don't have an adult out there who's going to buffer the neighborhood effects, and neighborhood effects in poverty are high pregnancy, violence, crime, drugs, gangs, etc. If you don't have somebody who can buffer those effects for you and help you deal with them, the chances of you getting derailed are much higher. And so I'm saying you want to break the pattern of generational poverty, you have to go 2 generations at once.
Now, that makes sense, because I have exactly what you said. I have heard parents sitting in my office with their children say, now, look, I'm in school. I've gone back to school. I dropped out, but now I'm going back to get my GED, or either I'm in community college, and you see me working at the beauty salon school. So, therefore, if I can do it, I'm expecting you to do it. Now, that I have heard.
Yes, and they'll say, like we've had so many adults say to us, Ruby, I didn't even know you were supposed to do this. I didn't know you were supposed to tell your kids this stuff. They've said stuff like, I didn't know there's such a thing as a future story. I didn't know, that it's just work. It's nothing. There's no rocket science here. I didn't know. We talk about predators and how they take advantage, and just so many knowledge bases that get transferred intergenerationally. University of Chicago just did a study, found out that in generational poverty, over time, you lose about a half a standard deviation in test scores.
Oh, wow.
Because you don't have access to the info.
Right. What does, because I know, again, you were just talking about the standard deviation in test scores, how does being in the poverty category impact in terms of, say, I know children starting kindergarten or first or second grade, there's a certain word count that they should be exposed to in order for them to be successful. I don't forget if it's 5,000 words or 8,000 words or whatever it's supposed to be. Many children coming from the impoverished area has very limited vocabulary because they have not been exposed to a lot of vocabulary words. How much is that impacted by, again, being in poverty?
Well, language is passed intergenerationally, and the research is that they just did a study at University of Missouri, Kansas City. They put tape recorders in homes by economic class, and they recorded how much language a child got between the ages of 1 and 4. And basically what they found, in a welfare household, a child heard in 3 years a total of 13 million words. In working class, in 3 years, they would hear a total of 26 million words. In a professional household, they heard a total of 45 million words. And they found that a 3-year-old in a professional household has more vocabulary than an adult in a welfare household.
And that rings true. And all of that is preparatory for whenever you enter school and how you articulate and interact with your teachers as well as your peers. The same thing holds true back to we were talking resources. If you go to, say, your local bookstore, Barnes & Noble or whoever it may be, again, what are the chances of finding someone in the poverty class, unless they have the wherewithal to say, you know what, I'm going to break out of this, so therefore I'm going to do what someone in the other class may do. I'm asking that in terms of now that we have so many resources in terms of the internet, or they can go to the library, or is that back to the priority thing again?
Well, actually, the reality is there is one way that people in high poverty households get this language, and that's if they have a strong religious background. I don't care what the religion is. If they have a strong religious background, they're exposed to very sophisticated vocabulary. But one of the things that most people don't know is only 50% of high poverty households have internet.
And again, and I'm glad you said that, because that's an assumption of, and that's why this is so important for teachers to be listening and to get an understanding and an appreciation for, even when we're giving assignments, we're making an assumption that everyone has a computer and internet at home. So when we now give a research assignment and say, okay, this is your homework, I'm expecting you to go home and research it, and point of pride or whatever, the child may or may not say, I don't have a computer at home. And so now the next day when they don't come in with homework and they don't give that as the real reason, then there's a conflict again. Right.
See, one of the deals is that in most households you will have cable, but you don't have internet, because that's 50% of high poverty households do not have internet, because it's another $30-40 a month, okay, for internet.
Right.
So, and you don't have a computer, you have a smartphone, okay? So one of the issues is that kids come in, they know how to operate a smartphone, they can operate an iPad, but you get them into a word processing document, an
Correct.
Excel document, a PowerPoint document, they have no idea how those work.
And see, again, as an educator or a teacher, the assumption is, especially if in your household, because that's the other thing, we process information based on our own experiences. So if in my house I have internet, I have computer, I'm making the assumption that every house has that.
Oh, they don't. I worked with one high school. They bought every high school kid an iPad, and half their students came from extreme poverty, and then they didn't have access to internet, and the teachers were so upset. They said, we can't give assignments, all the ways we learn to teach them to use this technology, it doesn't work. And they don't have access to internet. so I said, well, you may want to rethink how you do your assignments.
It is the 7 o'clock hour. I'm going to take a very short station break. In other words, there's things that I need to do, and then as long as Dr. Payne will hold out for the next 30 minutes or so before Dr. Blackburn comes on, or if she wants to hang on even when Dr. Blackburn comes on, they can tag team. She's welcome to do. So I'm going to do our 7 o'clock, the same thing that we did in the 6 o'clock hour in terms of sharing the weather and everything else with you. And then we will continue on with this extremely important conversation because I've been on Hootsuite blasting out to all of my social media sites that this, if you didn't hear any other interview I've ever had, this is one we need to hear because it can change thinking and behavior, or at least, if nothing else, create an awareness as to why, particularly if you're in education, kids may be doing or not doing what they are or are not doing in your classroom. A lot of it could be driven by the situations they're in coming out of home, and we really need to be sensitive to that and then change our strategies, which I'll talk about. That's one of the things I'm going to ask whenever we come back is, well, how do we now begin to change our strategies based on now what we're learning about poverty? So stay there. Don't you dare move.
WPSC-FM 80. You're hungry. Your rockers. Your punks. Your freaks. Your geeks. Your Greeks. Your party animals. Your gangsters. Your commuters. Your residents. Your students. Your alums. Your lawyers. Your truckers. Your calls. Your tweets. And we'll give you rock, classic, indie, punk, alternative, easy, hard, raps, rhymes, mixes, and drops. We'll give you kick-ass music because we're WPSC 88.7 FM, Brave New Radio. Sound good?
Straight. Here's your local forecast.
31.9 degrees, and the computer tells me it feels like 32, so I guess you can't get much closer. 31.9. Tomorrow, Sunday, a mainly sunny sky, 55 as a high, 32 as a low, partly cloudy Sunday night. Monday, few passing clouds, otherwise generally Sunday, 32, and then on Tuesday, sunshine and clouds, mixed, high of 48, low of 31. Rounding out our forecast on Wednesday, a mix of clouds and sun in the morning, 10% chance of rain, followed by cloudy skies, and it's going to be cloudy on Wednesday night, low of 36. Well, that is the weather brought to you by the WP 88.7 FM Weather Center. I hope you have been with us since 6 o'clock a.m. If you're an early riser on Saturday morning, I hope you've been with us, as my guest is Dr. Ruby K. Payne, and we are talking about poverty, as she is the author of the book in many editions, Understanding the Frameworks of Poverty. And that's what we've been talking about for the last hour, and we'll talk about for the next 20 minutes, 25 minutes or so, or however long Dr. Payne chooses to hang out with us. But right before I shared the weather and everything with you, I said when we came back from all of that, I was going to ask the question, now that we know what we know, after someone has attended one of your sessions or they read your book, what strategies now would you recommend that particularly classroom teachers begin to put in place when they're seeing behaviors from children or not that could be linked to the home life?
Well, there's behaviors and then there's learning. And one of the things is we go back to that basketball, football deal. And we talk about hidden rules, just point blank, okay? And one teacher I know, she made they talked about basketball, football rules and made a chart, on the board. And then they went back and made a chart about rules at school and rules out of school. And which rules will help you win where you are, okay? So I think just articulating them and working with students to understand different rules help you survive different environments. And they get that. They don't have an issue with it. But the larger, let me just say one aside here about race and discipline behavior. Sometimes a student will say to a teacher, well, that's a white rule. Do you know what I mean?
I do.
Or they'll call it and so we just talk about, no, it's actually rules people use in their environments at work and school. And I talk to them about why they use those rules, okay? And I say they help keep people safe typically. They help get work done. They bring stability. So people tend to use rules that help that particular environment. And then I'll sometimes talk to them about the rules they use in their environment to stay safe. And they'll tell them to you. They know them. okay? And we talk about how a different environment requires a different set of rules. And I let them argue. You know, they like to argue. And so I'll say, sure, let's argue about this.
Right.
And but one thing I need to say here is I have been criticized for not talking about race and poverty. And one of the reasons I don't mix race in, I'm much more interested about just stability of resources and learning.
Right.
Okay? But it depends where you are in the U.S., which race you're dealing with, and the issues behind that. Like, for example, if you're on the East Coast or the South, it has to do with African Americans, and the whole root of that poverty was slavery.
Correct.
If you are on the West Coast, okay, then it's Native American Indian issues and poverty, and in the West, and that came out of how they were put on reservations. Do you know what I mean?
I do.
And all the boarding schools, and the fact that even now one of the poorest places I've been in the U.S. is in the Navajo reservation. $5,000 a year is the average annual income. Okay. But on reservations, you're not allowed to own property. Okay, the property belongs to the tribe. So the ability to create wealth by owning property, you know what I mean, and acquiring.
Yes.
That's not there. Okay.
Wow.
Like, for example, if you're in South Texas and the West, it's and Hispanic poverty is often related to immigration and how you get your green cards and how you get your visas. You don't know what I mean there. And then you get into Appalachia, and it's about white poverty where they've lived in these isolated mountainous areas for generations. Okay?
Right.
And access is different. If you're in Hawaii, for example, it has to do with the native Hawaiians, and what happened there is they used to be the wealthiest people on the island.
Right.
But they got the Filipinos to take over their plantations. The Filipinos actually ended up buying the plantations, and now the educational system in Hawaii is heavily influenced by Asians and Japanese, okay? So people, depending on where, and then if you go around the world, the issues are different again. So I have just focused more on survival and resources and what it means then when you try to interface with an institution. And for me, you asked, what do you do in schools? That's the biggest issue. How do you take a child who's got all these rules they're living with, and they understand them very well, but to survive this institution, they have to interface in a different way.
Correct. And it's interesting as you gave the different groups, because many people think that poverty is just a black or a Hispanic thing. They think it's just an African American thing, when in reality it's not.
No, actually the two groups that have the highest percent of poverty are Native American Indians and Hawaiians.
Interesting. You see, again, that's something that, again, as we associate, and then if folks fall into stereotypes, so forth and so on, they associate poverty, again, with African American or poverty. But you're absolutely right. And the causality makes sense. Like you just explained in each group what be driving the poverty from each one. That makes a whole lot of sense. Just like you just said, the American Indian, they can't own land.
Right. And one last thing about Native American Indians, one thing that's exacerbated it is because they've gotten casinos, and a lot of the tribes have gone to PPD, which is per person dividend. So what they do at the end of the year, they look at the profits that were made for the tribe, and they do a per person dividend. So each person gets X amount of dollars from the profits, okay? Well, they typically paid in January or February, and then they are broke by April and May. Do you follow me?
I do. So in terms of, I'm looking at the various titles in your book, and one of them is this notion of role models and emotional resources, because one of the things that I hear often is, well, the kids are only going to rise to as high as what they see. In other words, what they see on the street, what they see on the corner, what they see at home, and they leave the school. And my pushback is always kind of like, I said, yeah, but they come to us and they see us dressed. They see us acting a certain way. They see us speaking a different way. Why would they not now see us model and start saying, I want to be like Mr. Medley, or I want to be like Dr. Payne, or I want to be like so forth and so on, versus always falling back on just what they see in the street or at home? So talk a little bit about this importance of role models, because we just kicked off a male mentoring session with my boys on Thursday night. We're going to meet now every Thursday from 5:30 to 6:30, where they're going to be exposed to some very upwardly mobile African-American males. My school is predominantly African-American and Hispanic. So they're going to be exposed to men as to what they can aspire to. How important is that?
It's critical. In fact, the research on students from poverty, regardless of race, is simply they won't learn from a person they don't like. And this Dr. Tony Bates in Ireland, I followed him speak. He spoke before I did in Ireland, and he's doing a research study with 15,000 kids against 1.5 million data points. And the data point that they're finding that makes the biggest difference in success in life is whether or not you have one good adult, okay? And so for me, it's all about relationships first in the school business. They won't learn from you. I mean, I say to teachers, have you had a kid say to you, you don't like me? Or a kid say, I like you, I don't like him, I'll do it for you, but I'll do it for him?
Right.
And they'll say this, if you have a problem, you just let me know, I'll take care of it for you. I'm at your back.
Right.
They're going to defend you because you're theirs. And they won't learn from you if they don't like you.
As a matter of fact, that's where I go in terms of, this is my third year in the building that I've been assigned to, and I've done a lot of work on relationship building, hence the book study we're doing, your book, because I truly believe that. But a lot of times from your central office folks or your district administrators or whatever, yeah, that's nice, but we need the test scores. And my pushback is, well, I'll get you the test scores if we can get the relationships.
Yeah, see, that just blows me away. I do not. You see, it's back to that technical versus cognitive piece.
Right.
They'll go, you have to have that relationship. But I just spoke with an assistant soup in Houston. She interviewed all the fifth graders, most of them boys, that didn't pass the Texas assessment test.
Right.
In Texas, you don't pass fifth grade, you got to repeat the grade. Every boy, every kid told her the same thing. When she asked them why they didn't pass the test, they all said the same thing. I didn't like the teacher. One of them said to her, I showed her, didn't I? What do you mean? She said, well, I showed her, I didn't like her. So you have to repeat the class. He said, I didn't know that. Let me just say one more side about that. Teachers say to me, how do you know whether they like you or not? I say, look, it's based on your nonverbals.
Yes,
It teaches you to read nonverbals.
Right.
Because nonverbals tell you a person's intent. And when you're at survival, you want to know intent.
Believe me, I tell folks all the time, your most challenging child or your least educable child, if they know nothing else, they know sincerity. If they don't learn, if they know nothing else, children know sincerity. I've seen it. When I was in the classroom as well as the principal, I know of what I speak in terms of that. Your most cantankerous child knows when you're being mean, if they perceive it as mean because you love them and care for them, versus somebody's just being mean to be mean, or they don't like kids. They can pick up on that. Just what you just said. It's almost like a survival instinct.
Oh, they smell it.
Yes, they do.
Yeah. I've said to kids before, they go, I don't like you. I go, well, that's all right. Sometimes I don't like me either. But I'll say to them, I care about you.
That's right.
And I'll say this to them, you're not going to like me every day because I am going to insist that you learn, okay? So it's not going to be pretty every day, but I care about you.
That's right.
I wouldn't work so hard to make this happen.
Absolutely. So as I was saying, we've done extensive work over the 2 years and a couple of months that I've been there, and it's beginning to pay off in terms of behavior and everything else. We've done a 180-degree turn, and it's partially because, literally, I have the words love tacked all over the building. Last summer, I was watching the news, and it was two guys in New Orleans was doing a social experiment to see if they could cut down on the violence by just displaying the word love. They had it on phone signs, on phone poles, and everywhere. And I saw it, and I said, you know what, I'm going to do that in my building. And so in every classroom and hallway and stairwell, everywhere you go, you'll see a white background with the words love in red letters all over the place. Just again, back to the subconscious. Between that and other things that we've put in place, it is beginning to take root, that the kids are becoming more mannerable. They're saying thank you. They're saying please. I'm even hearing them saying I love you. And so things like that has begun to change the climate and culture in the building. And as I said, a lot of times the only thing I get constantly hit was, yeah, but your test scores are so low. Like, just, give us time. We'll get the test scores there, because I'm a big believer in the relationship piece as well. So that's why I was so glad to see that as a chapter in the book.
Yeah, and I'm amazed that people don't see. All learning is double coded. It's
correct.
Emotionally, it's coded cognitively, and you have to. I've had kids say to me, I just don't trust you. And I've said, you know what? You don't really have a reason to, because you don't know me yet.
Right.
So it's all right. And I said, you just watch me a while. See, I find some teachers try too hard to get them to like you.
Well, that's what that. When it's real or not, or when it's fluff or phony, as my wife can call it. She call it fluff. They know when it's fluff.
And I'll just say, you just acknowledge where they are. And the other thing is, they aren't going to respect you unless you're personally tough.
Right.
Okay? So, because you have to be tough to survive poverty, okay? So, if you're just point blank with them, and I've just said, like I taught high school for a long time.
Right.
I had these ninth graders came in one day, and I don't know, they must have gotten together before they came in, but they said, Miss Payne, we quit. You've been working us like dogs, and we quit. I said, really? I said, you see those kids out there in the hall? They said, yeah. I said, you know what? They cry themselves to sleep every night.
Right.
They sob. They said, they do not. I said, yes, they do. And I said, do you know why they do that? And they said, no, why? I said, because they can't be in here with me.
Wow.
That isn't true. I said, would you rather have any other English teacher? They said, no. I said, okay, now get back to work. Okay.
That's right. It really is about, and there is no reason why learning and education cannot be fun. And I remember someone I was speaking with did a wonderful play on words in terms of children should not be bored of education. Right. And so there's no reason why you cannot have that kind of interplay. As a matter of fact, it really does foster the relationships. And I know the very topic that we were just talking about in terms of the states and upper echelon administration always focusing so much just on the test score. Someone I was speaking with had shared with me, what we're doing is, instead of creating a love of learning, we're creating a fear of learning. And that's not good either. And I'm looking here in the conclusion of the book, as you start off with, one of the topics yet untouched is the need to grieve and grow through the grieving process as one teaches or works with the poor. As we get ready to end and come to the end of this interview, let's end with your conclusion. How does that all fit in, the whole grieving process with working with impoverished kids?
What people want to do is, I tell audiences, they get in the triangle. And let me explain what that is. There's something called the Karpman triangle, okay? And if you take a triangle and put it one corner rescuer, one corner bully, and one corner victim. And there's a lot of people who believe that when they work with the poor, to teach them, their job is to rescue them. It is
right.
Not. Their job is not to rescue. Because what happens when you get in that triangle, then you eventually become a victim and you eventually become a bully. You take on all three roles. And more importantly, you never solve the problem.
Right.
What I say to them is this: your job is to do two things. Provide a relationship and provide education. Okay? You let them make the choice about how it fits into their life. Okay? But they're a thinking, smart, resourceful human being. Okay? Respect that. Respect that they need relationships and information. And I think that you grieve. I mean, I've been there myself. I had a little boy when I was a principal who was being sexually, ritualistically abused, and I couldn't do anything to stop it. I cried for days about that boy. But the bottom line is, you have to say in the end, I gave relationships, I gave information, I did everything I could. I've said to students before, look, I respect you so much for what you live with. honest to God.
Right.
I don't know I could.
Right.
But I can't change it. And then I'll say this to them, but if you don't want to live that way the rest of your life, I can give you the knowledge and the skills and the tools you need so you don't have to. And if you want me to do that, I'll do everything in my power to make sure you have it. And so I think just that real acknowledgement of the reality.
Right.
And hope for the future. You give them relationships and you give them education.
And I just quoted you on that on Twitter as well. As a teacher, your job is to provide two things. You provide a relationship and an education.
Yeah.
We have come down to the last few minutes of our interview, and I always turn the mic over to the guest in terms of promotion. That means you can promote your books, your workshops. You can promote anything you like to promote. The only thing you cannot say is the cost of the book or the cost of the workshop. But anything short of that, you are free to promote any book signings, anywhere you're going to be, any works, how folks can get in touch with you, your websites, phone numbers. So I turn the mic over to you, and even before I do that, I thank you so much because this discussion was so enlightening and inspirational for me. And I'm sure if it was that for me, it was that for our listening audience. The show is recorded. I will be placing it in the archives on my YouTube site so that folks who did not rise early would have the opportunity to listen to it at their leisure. But again, Dr. Payne, I thank you so much. And this is your opportunity to promote Dr. Ruby K. Payne and understanding the frameworks of poverty and anything else you'd like to promote. Well,
I'd like to say that if they want the book, they can go to my website, which is www.ahaprocess.com, AHAPROCESS.com, or it's on Amazon, Framework for Understanding Poverty. But I'd like to say to all who are listening, particularly the educators, don't lose hope, okay? These last 10 years have been brutal for educators, because it is huge overemphasis on the technical aspect of learning, okay, test scores. But never forget how much difference you make in the life of a child in ways you'll never know, and don't ever forget that you teach two generations, not just one, because the kids you teach go on to teach it to their children.
Absolutely. I end all of my staff meetings with teachers make every other profession possible. And that's what I end each staff meeting with, to help them understand that there would be nothing, no president, no astrophysicist, no Ph.D.s, no nothing, if it were not for teachers. And so I could not agree with you more in terms of the importance of what we do and not to give up. I am with you wholeheartedly, 1,000,000,000%. Yeah. And as I said, I thank you so much for joining. We'll be in touch in terms of getting you a copy of it that you feel free to post or do or share any which way you'd like.
Thank you so much, and bless you for all you do.
Thank you. Same to you, and have a wonderfully blessed day.
Thank you.
Take care now. Well, that concludes our first interview in a Reading Circle doubleheader, and it is going just as scheduled. In terms of my next guest will be joining us in about 5 minutes or so, if that. She may be even calling in shortly, and that is none other than another Ph.D., Dr. Barbara R. Blackburn. So we started off with Dr. Ruby K. Payne talking about poverty, and now we're going to talk about rigor in your classroom with Dr. Barbara R. Blackburn. So she'll be coming on shortly. I'm going to go ahead and share what I need to share with you. Let somebody know that Dr. Blackburn is coming on with me momentarily.
Adopted. Over the years, I came to know what really happened. She had us when she was 17. The way she saw things going, it wasn't a good environment to raise a kid. The fact that she did that just shows how strong of a woman my mother is, and I thank her each and every day for it. I wouldn't be the person who I am today, and I like the person I am today. I knew I was loved and I was part of a family, so that was what's important to me.
For more information, visit ichooseadoption.org.
I'm Christoph. And I'm Christopher. And our mom chose adoption.
take a look under your bed. Find stuff under there? What about jobs? No? Now try your basement. There's a pair of overalls that overall you're not so into anymore. A perfectly good laptop that hasn't seen your lap in months. And even more stuff. But still no jobs? Well, you really have both. See, stuff is defined as household articles considered as a group. Sometimes this stuff is no longer needed. Wait, no longer needed? That can't be right. Because remember those jobs you were looking for? Those are really needed. And they're the stuff inside your stuff. Even inside that winter coat that moved with you to Phoenix. Our job is to unlock those jobs. And it starts when you donate your stuff to your local Goodwill. Here's how we do it. When you donate to Goodwill, we sell your stuff to provide job training for people right here in your community. So just by teaming up with Goodwill, you help create jobs. And isn't that worth parting with the leftover keytar from your 80s cover band? Goodwill. Donate stuff, create jobs. Find your nearest donation center at goodwill.org. A message from Goodwill and the Ad Council.
Hey, parents of children with asthma, here's another hit from the Breathe Easies.
Don't smoke in the house. Don't smoke in the house. Don't smoke around the kids in the house. Don't smoke in the car. Don't smoke in the house. Don't break my heart with your secondhand smoke in the kids and contribute the asthma.
Preventing asthma attacks can be as simple as making your home and car smoke-free zones. For more Breathe Easy tips to help stop asthma attacks, go to noattacks.org. Brought to you by the EPA and the Ad Council.
Want to expand your horizons? Want to broaden your mind? Well, listen to the only show of its kind. Listen to The Reading Circle.
We bring you what's going on in the world of reading, in the world of books. Sometimes the book may be from 20, 30 years ago, because the thing about books, they are timeless, particularly if there's a good message. And then there are times when we do books that are hot off the press, that were just released.
Listen to The Reading Circle every Saturday morning from 6 a.m.
The Reading Circle with your host, Marc Medley.
Only on WP 88.7 FM.
My name is Diamonds. I am a radio DJ in North Jersey. I broadcast on the frequency of 88.7 FM. I will be on the air every Saturday from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. when the sun is setting in the sky. If you are out there, if anyone is out there, I can provide music, I can provide entertainment. If there's anybody out there, anybody, please.
Club Melting Pot. Every Saturday from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. Only on WP 88.7 FM, Brave New Radio.
And on the seventh day 'twas created, the Sunday morning edition of The Naked Brunch. Nowhere else will you find rock, folk, bubblegum, and prog all in one neatly created package. That's The Naked Brunch. And the music is the star of the show. How you doing? G-Man checking in. I hope you'll join me Sunday mornings and experience radio the way it used to be. Experience music the way it used to be. Experience the magic and power of radio as it was back in the glory days of the 60s and 70s. Music, it's the soundtrack of your life. I'll play your soundtrack every Sunday, live and in color, as host of The Naked Brunch, starting at 9 a.m. Isn't it about time you came home?
You're listening to The Reading Circle with Marc Medley on Brave New Radio.
Yes, indeed. Because in the first hour and a half, as you've heard, we had Dr. Ruby K. Payne, author of Understanding the Frameworks of Poverty. And in this hour, an hour and a half or so, between now and 9 o'clock, I have on the line with me Dr. Barbara R. Blackburn. She is Ph.D. as well. If those of you who listen regularly, you know a couple months ago, Dr. Blackburn and I tried to have our interview and we had equipment failure. It was one of those Houston, we have a problem moments. I could hear Dr. Blackburn. She could not hear me. And So since that time, we have rescheduled and all the equipment is working fine. I'm going to get her introduced. Dr. Barbara Blackburn has dedicated her life to raising the level of rigor and motivation for professional educators and students alike. What differentiates Barbara's 14 books are her easily executable concrete examples based on decades of experience as a teacher, professor, and consultant. Barbara's dedication to education was inspired in her early years by her parents. Her father's doctorate and lifetime career as a professor taught her the importance of professional training. Her mother's career as school secretary shaped Barbara's appreciation of the effort all staff play in the education of every child. I know that's right. Barbara has taught early childhood, elementary, middle, and high school students and has served as an educational consultant for 3 publishing companies. She holds a master's degree in school administration and is certified as a school principal in North Carolina. She received her Ph.D. in curriculum and teaching from the University of North Carolina at Greensboro. In 2006, she received the award for Outstanding Junior Professor at Winthrop University. She recently left her position at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte to write and speak full-time. In addition to speaking at state and national conferences, she also regularly presents workshops for teachers and administrators in elementary, middle, and high schools. Her workshops are lively and engaging and filled with practical information, and her most popular topics include rigor is not a 4-letter word, rigorous schools and classrooms leading the way, motivation, engagement, rigor equals student success, instructional strategies that motivate students, content literacy strategies for the young and the restless, motivating yourself and options, and increased support lead to success. We welcome once again, we tried it a couple of months ago, to our Reading Circle microphones, none other than Dr. Barbara R. Blackburn. Dr. Blackburn, good morning.
Oh, good morning to you, Mark. Thank you so much.
I tell you, because that morning, I'm on the microphone that morning. Dr. Blackburn, can you hear me? Dr. Blackburn, Barbara, are you there? And she called and hung up and called and hung up. We did that at least 5 to 10 times that morning.
Okay, all kinds of things to make it work, and just nothing would work.
It really would not. Nothing worked is correct. So we got your reschedule, and as divine providence or fate or whatever you want to call it would have it, it happened to be on the same morning that I was interviewing Dr. Payne. So I said, you know what, this is going to be great. We'll do the back-to-back interviews and we'll just make it Education Sunday. I made sure every educator I know knew about this show this morning. My entire building, every educator I have on my social media sites, I made sure that, look, you got to listen this morning because it's Education Saturday, and something you will hear, I'm sure, will help you in the classroom. So the first hour, we talked about the impacts of poverty on children in the classroom, and one of the things, and I shared this with you the last time we talked, that I'm constantly getting hit with as principal of the school, as various stakeholders come into the building, whether it's on the state level or whether it's central office level, they're coming through the classroom saying your work is not rigorous enough for the students. It's not challenging the students enough. And the pushback we constantly have is, for these students, it may not look rigorous to you as you walk in the classroom, but for a child who's in the 5th grade reading on the 1st grade or kindergarten level, even if I give them the Cat in the Hat, that's rigorous for them. But that's what I want to talk about, because we really, my staff, myself, we really struggled with this notion of rigor. So that's where your book along with Dr. Payne's book are the 2 books that we're doing as book studies this year. So that's why I'm doubly excited that I've had the opportunity to speak with both of you personally. But let's talk about this whole notion of rigor, of what it is and what it is not.
Well, that's actually one of what I think is a huge problem, is that people don't understand what rigor is. They tend to think rigor is more. So if I give double homework, that's rigorous. Or if I give more math problems, that's rigorous. And that's not rigor at all. Because rigor is about depth, it's more about the quality of what you're doing than it is about the quantity of what you're doing. And there's really several aspects of it. Certainly we start with looking at our expectations. What are our expectations for students. And we have always known that high expectations make a difference with students. But sometimes those don't really come into play the way we think they do. For example, we think we have high expectations, but if you really dig down deep into what you're thinking, we have those hidden thoughts like, oh, well, they're from that neighborhood, so they're doing the best they can do.
That's right.
Or, you know, they're a special needs student, so we really can't expect any more than that. Or, you know, she's doing the best she can do. And those statements really reflect lowered expectations. So I'm not saying we can't have different expectations, but we have to be really careful that we don't lower our expectations. Because if you look at some of the research, Robert Marzano in particular has done some work with this. Our expectations actually play out in our actions.
That's correct.
So what he's found is that we behave differently if we have different expectations for students. So, for example, Mark, let's say that I've got Libby in class, who is just a sharp student. She is straight A's. She always does her homework. She is first one to raise her hand. She's also going to ask really good questions in class. I mean, she's just sharp. And then I've got you in class, and you're not quite Libby. You know, you struggle. You're doing good to get half your homework done. You never raise your hand. If I call on you, you put your head down and mumble a little bit because you're worried that you don't have the right answer. You just struggle. You're not a discipline problem, but you struggle. Well, what Marzano found was that I may start the year off with high expectations for both of you. You know, I believe both of you can learn.
Right.
I believe both of you are going to thrive. But what happens is, let's say over that first month of school, if anything, Libby exceeds my expectations. So mine just get higher and higher for her. You, on the other hand, you're struggling, so I don't want to make it too hard for you, so I sort of lower my expectations a little bit. And then I begin to act differently towards you. So in closer proximity to her and give her more eye contact. Because if I stand close to you and give you eye contact, it makes you nervous. So I'll do that with her. I will give her more praise and positive feedback because it's easy to find things with her. You'll get less of that. I'll give her more wait time because if I can wait on her, she'll come up with the answer. But with you, not so much. I will ask her higher order questions, and I'll ask you lower level questions. Now, there's nothing wrong with me starting with a lower level question for you, but with her, I would push her to expand her answer, and with you, I'll let you off the hook. And then with the homework, let's say both of you come in and only did half your homework. With her, I'm really disappointed, and I really encourage her to finish it, and I push her to do that. With you, I'm just grateful you did anything, so I take it. So those expectations play out in actions that we may not even realize we're doing. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Because, matter of fact, at the conclusion of the first interview, that's where Dr. Payne got to in terms of, I'm trying to think exactly how she worded it, but it was that same concept. And I know how I worded it with a colleague of mine. She said it one day we were talking, and she said, you know, it's really not in the pity, but in the push. And that is, we tend to, as teachers, as you just said, we will pity the children who are coming from the struggling neighborhoods as opposed to pushing them. Because like you said, well, that's the best they can do. And the crazy thing about it is we don't even realize that that's a low expectation. We think that we're doing something wonderful. Right. Because we're pitying them, right. And because we're, being soft with them because of their environment, we think we're doing something good. We think, we're being, compassionate, and when really we're hurting them.
Right. And again, it doesn't mean that I can't start where they are. If they're working below grade level, I can start there. But I can't leave them there and write kids off. I think that it's very subtle, and I think it's very subconscious. And
very much so. So now, and whenever we were going to do the interview the last time, we were talking offline before we were to go online, in terms of how do you strike the balance? How do you strike the balance between what is rigorous and what isn't, and then not falling into that pity trap or falling into the triangle that we were just talking about in terms of, well, you know, this is the best that they can do and so forth. Because I hear that a lot. You know what, Mr. Medley, this is, you know, this is about all they can do. I think it depends on how you engage it, because when I go into the classroom, I'm very lively, I'm energetic, I'm passionate. I go in there with the intent of having fun while at the same time, and the kids pick up on that. So there are some things I can get the kids to do that their teachers don't get them to do, and I sometimes kind of wonder, why don't you think like this? Why aren't you thinking the way that I'm thinking to engage the kids in the manner that you see me model for you, that they respond to? How do you strike the balance as to, because again, I have state folks and central office folks walk in the building and they say, you're still teaching that and this is December?
Right. And of rigor, which is that each student has to be supported so they can succeed. See, if we just have high expectations and expect them to get there, you know, learning by osmosis has never worked. So, you know, that's not going to happen.
Right.
And what we have to remember is the higher the level of rigor, the higher the level of support that is needed. So, for example, think back to your first year as a teacher. That was a challenging year for you, probably. Did you need any help that year?
Absolutely.
Well, that was rigorous, and you needed support. Students are the same way. When we are increasing the level of what they're expected to do, we have to increase the level of support. And that can come in a variety of ways. For example, a huge piece that is important for students is actually model our thinking. So it's things like, you know, when I get to a word in the story that I don't understand, the first thing I do is look at the words around it to see if I can figure it out. That kind of modeling their thinking. We do more of that at the primary grades. I think the older they get, we just sort of think, well, they don't really need it anymore. But the truth is they do.
Right.
So modeling our thinking is just something that ought to be a given. But also in terms of modeling, we need to model with samples of what we expect them to do.
Correct.
So whether I'm expecting them to write a sentence or write a narrative essay, I need to actually show them some samples, and we need to talk about what good looks like. For example, I was working with a group of sixth grade teachers a few years ago, and they had a real challenge with students answering extended response questions. So they wanted, you know, a paragraph or two, and the students were not doing well with that at all. It was a school that was 100% Title I, so 100% poverty, and they were really struggling with it. And so what we came up with was a process, and they started by teaching and going through the whole process. Students came in. The teacher talked about that one of the expectations this year was that they write these longer answers. And she wanted to know from the students what it looks for to get well. And those are typical responses. Length is the number one students come up with. And then the teachers each talked to the class about, okay, let's really talk about it. Yes, it's important that you're neat and that you spell correctly. But what we're really looking at is quality, which is not necessarily length. Now, you've definitely got to write more than a sentence or two, but what we're looking at is, did you have a good beginning? Did you have a good conclusion?
Correct.
Did you make your point? Did you provide supporting evidence? So the language arts teacher would actually work through that process with them, then would show a sample of a response and ask the kids what grade they would assign, why, then she or he would talk through what they would do. Then, and this would be over several days, then the students were given another sample paper, and they had to work in pairs to assess it. And then by the end of the week, students were writing their own answers, bringing them in for peer review. So they worked through, over the course of a week, a process of beginning to teach them what it was. Well, then the next week, in their science classrooms, the science teachers did the same thing, only a shortened version. You know, you may remember that we're going to be writing extended responses this year in our school. And so then they worked through the process. The next year it was social studies teachers the next week. And then they went for related arts. And then the last week it was math, because extended response in math looks a little bit different. It tends to be explain your answers. And so what happened was the kids were like, oh, my gosh, are y'all talking to each other? You know, what's going on? And they began to realize that, one, this was a standard expectation. And two, they began to write better answers because everybody was on the same page and actually knew what to look for. And so that kind of modeling is really important, and we underestimate that.
Now, talk a little bit about from the teacher perspective. I know they're going to hate this for all the teachers who are listening, but talk a little bit about how does planning play into that? Because that takes planning. And a lot of times we'll have teachers say either I don't have time to plan, or either, you know, you get a preparatory period, or I don't have time at home, or you've put so much on us that we don't have a chance to think in terms of like that. What do you say to the teacher that says that?
Well, one, you're never going to have enough time to do everything that needs to be done. Teaching is hard work. There's never enough hours in the day. It's a hard balance to make sure you're taking care of family along with work, and you need to find that balance. So, I don't want a teacher working 8 hours at home after they've already worked 10 hours school day. What I do think is it's a matter of working smarter, not harder. So, for example, with this school that I was working with, no one teacher was individually planning that. We worked together to develop the plan it was a professional learning day, so they had some blocks of time. I was working with teachers for about an hour at a time. So we developed the plan then. Teachers in subject areas worked together to find some work samples. Some of them had saved some from the year before, so they used the same one with everybody, so everybody wasn't having to come up with their own. And then they just had to, chunk the time in the classroom, which is also an issue. But what they found was that by taking the time to teach this, they brought back time later in the year when they were still dealing with it.
Absolutely.
So they didn't do that anymore.
Absolutely.
So, you do have to find the planning, but I think the more you can work with other teachers, the better off you are. And I think a real disservice we do is that we stay very isolated and with other teachers. And really, that's the best way to do it with anything. If I need to, let's say I need to create new lesson plans because we've got a new social studies textbook. Well, instead of me creating all the plans, if there's 4 of us, let's split it up. Let's each take a unit or a chapter, each create it, then come together and meet and talk about it. And certainly we've got the flexibility to adapt if we want to, but I'm not having to create everything from scratch.
Right.
And we don't do enough of that, Mark. We just don't.
And you're absolutely right, because all the research has shown that. I'm reading a book by Michael Fullen right now in terms of the principalship, and he says the same thing in terms of having the teachers work together as teams, whether it's grade level teams or subject matter teams or what have you, to do exactly what you just said. And we don't do that. We're still trying to come from under the silo approach. I close my door and I do what I want to do. And that's why sometimes, in my particular building, we do get hit with, well, what are they doing?
Right. And they don't get to see each other teach, so they don't get good new ideas. There's a lot of problems with that. Now, I want to go back to the concept of support, because I have a couple of other strategies that I really want to share. One is chunking, just chunking information. And, you've probably got listeners going, well, I chunk information. But, that's another thing we do really, really well.
Right.
At the primary grades. But the older they get, we sort of feel like, why do I need to chunk information? They're old enough, they should be able to handle more. And chunking is as simple as taking something big and cutting it down and doing it in small chunks. So it's nothing complicated. And I actually had a teacher say to me a few weeks ago, you know what, I'm trying to teach my kids to be responsible, and they need to learn. I'm not going to stop and break this into small pieces for them.
Now, how does the chunking, because a lot of times we've had the discussion of chunking and scaffolding, and the teacher will come back and say, well, when you walked in, I was in the first part of the chunking, so that's why it wouldn't appear rigorous. Can you have both? Can you have chunking and rigor?
Oh, sure. Absolutely. The point is, if I'm seeing something that's not rigorous right now, show me what you're building to. Show me that the later chunks are rigorous. So you can absolutely, it's like lower level questions. Everybody goes, oh, you've always got to be asking higher level questions. No, there's an appropriate time for lower level questions, as long as you're following it up with higher level questions. So when I walk in and I'm in a classroom for 10 minutes and it doesn't look rigorous, I'm going to ask that teacher, show me what you would be doing next. Show me how that was building to something more rigorous. So it's not the isolated piece, it's how does it fit into the overall picture.
That's an interesting point, and I'll tell you why. Because one of our school improvement goals this year is to get more higher order thinking questions. We have 4 goals. We have a language arts goal, we have a math goal, we have a climate and culture goal, and the 4th goal in terms of instruction is higher order thinking questions. And that's an interesting point you just made, that my teachers will probably hug you like crazy in terms of, as long as you're moving towards the higher order thinking questions. And see, it gets difficult because
now the challenge is that too often we spend too much time on the lower level.
Right. That's exactly right. And so, but you gave me an interesting question to ask just now whenever you said, all right, show me where it's moving towards, because that is the limit. No, I'm at the lower level because I'm trying to build it up. I am scaffolding. I am chunking. The time that you walked in for the 10-minute or the 20-minute observation, that's whenever I was at the lower level. So that for all of it, it's just that we're constantly pressured because of our low test scores, if you will, to get there quickly. And there really is no quick fix and no magic bullet, but those beyond us really are pushing us toward that. And so one of the reasons that I chose your book to do the study on this year in terms of is to help us really identify and understand what rigor is all about. So as we talk about that, I know in your book you have a lot of different tools you can use, such as Bloom's taxonomy and all the rest of them. Bloom's we know best, but there were some others you put in the book as well that the teachers can use to foster higher order thinking. Talk a little bit about those various models.
All right, before we do that, I'm going to mess with your radio show. Give one more specific scaffolding activity that teachers may not know about, but it really works with what you're talking about walking in and seeing something that's lower level. And it's a specific reading strategy. And here's what happens. Let's say I'm teaching 4th grade, and I need them to read a 4th grade article about volcanoes.
Right.
And I've got 12 students who can't read it. So I find them something to read that's down on their level. So I find a little 2nd grade piece about volcanoes.
Right.
And if you walk in and you go, well, you're not teaching rigor, you're teaching something lower level. And if we stop there, you're right. But the strategy that I prefer is called layering. Layer bricks to make a wall.
Exactly.
You layer meaning. And at layering meaning, you do exactly that. You take them down to the easier article. But once they've read it, you bring them back to the grade level article, and with your support, they read the grade level article. And because they've read the easier article first, they've built background knowledge and they've built vocabulary. And because of that, they're better able to be successful with the grade level piece. So with that strategy, I'm balancing meeting them where they are, but then pushing them back up for the increased rigor. And what happens is we don't do that second piece of it. So, that would be a piece where if you came in and they were reading the easier text and you said, this isn't rigorous, I could show you. That's right, because here's where I'm starting with them to build background and vocabulary. But tomorrow, they're working with me in a small group to read the on-grade level piece. See, that's an entirely different situation than just, I'm giving them something to read that they can read.
Now, that makes perfect sense to me. And if a teacher were to tell me that, they would not be in any type of observational trouble whatsoever, because that makes sense to me. Matter of fact, I'm going to share that with them Monday in terms of, because I have a staff meeting Monday at the 3:00 hour, and that strategy that you just said, I'm going to share with them in terms of read the same content just at the lower level and then move to the grade level. Same thing. Many of our children, a lot of the readings that we do have not had those experiences. So whenever they're now reading a story that they have absolutely no experience, it's not making a lot of sense to them. So that strategy that you just gave makes a whole lot of sense, because it serves a multi-purpose. They do more than one thing. Right.
So let me give you a couple of sources with that. Newsela, which is NEWSELA, and you can Google them to find them, has been around the longest. They pick a news article of the day, and they provide it at varied levels. So the other thing is you can use this to push your higher achieving students. You can give them something that's even more challenging. So it really does work both ways. But Newsela has been around the longest. Another one I really like is Tween Tribune. So it's like Tween Tribune. I really like it because it's produced by the Smithsonian. So the quality of what's in there is, just top of the line. And I don't mean that Newsela isn't.
Right.
I really like what the Smithsonian puts out. They also provide some quizzes, which are moderately rigorous. You could beat them up a little bit, but they've got some quizzes with it. And they let you set up a virtual classroom all for free. And Newsela is free, but if you try to do the virtual classroom, you have to pay for it. And so I really like Queen Tribune for that. But my favorite site is a site called Rewordify. REWORDIFY. And I think it's just rewordify.com, but again, you could Google it. What it does is you can cut and paste text into the block, and it will simplify it for you.
Wow.
So you can take any text. And, to me, that's just a fabulous tool. It's particularly helpful with second language learners and special needs students, but it's perfect for the strategy of layering meaning. And so layering meaning doesn't work with kindergarten because, how much lower can you go in text with them? But certainly grades 4 and up, the layering meaning strategy is just exceptionally strong.
Wow. And those are strategies that certainly it's easy to implement immediately, because all of us, particularly in the schools, and we just had this conversation in the first hour in terms of, we make the assumption that every child has a computer in the home. But certainly in our schools, or at least in my school, we have enough computers that we can go to in the classroom or in the computer lab to work these sites that you're recommending and suggesting. So I need to change over. We're going to do that. If you've just joined us, my guest is Dr. Barbara R. Blackburn, and we are talking rigor in the classroom. Get on all of your social media sites and let them know that Dr. Blackburn is on the air with me right now.
WPSC-FM 88.7, Wayne, New Jersey.
Part of the William Patterson Broadcast Network. Brave New Radio.
Brave New Radio. Give us your tired, your poor, your hungry, your rockers, your punks, your freaks, your geeks, your Greeks, your party animals, your gangsters, your commuters, your residents, your students, your alums, your lawyers, your truckers, your calls, your tweets. And we'll give you rock, classic, indie, punk, alternative, easy, hard, raps, rhymes, mixes, and drops. We'll give you kick-ass music because we're WPSC 88.7 FM, Brave New Radio. Sound good?
Straight from the WP 88.7 FM Weather Center, here's your local forecast.
Well, 32 as a low, mainly sunny skies tomorrow, partly cloudy Sunday night, and then on Monday 54 as a high, 32 as a low, few passing clouds during the day, and some cloudy skies on Monday evening. Tuesday, sunshine and clouds, a little bit lower temps with 48 as a high, 31 as a low, partly cloudy Tuesday night, and then on Wednesday 49 as a high, 36 as a low, intervals of clouds and sunshine during the day, 40% chance of rain during the evening, cloudy skies again on Wednesday night. That is the weather brought to you right here from the WP 88.7 FM Weather Center. Well, we're in the 8 o'clock hour now in an extended version of the Reading Circle with Marc Medley. My guest is Dr. Barbara Blackburn, and we are talking about rigor in the classroom. And the reason that is such a challenge, particularly in an urban environment or an impoverished environment, or either an environment where achievement, academic achievement, has not been shown over a number of years, the question really does become, well, how do we define rigor? Because for a child who's in the 6th or 7th grade who is reading on the 2nd or 3rd grade level, in many instances, we'll walk in and the teacher has assigned something on the 2nd grade level for a 7th grader. So from the natural eye as you walk in, we're looking like, that's not rigorous. So that's what we're talking about, and this is an extremely important topic for me because I struggle with trying to figure it out myself. And I know the staff members that work with us, or the team members at my school, we sometimes maybe 5 will do.
Right. And what I'd rather have is 5 where they not only have to work out the problems, but they have to explain their work. Because in math particularly, it's one thing to show your work, it's another one to be able to explain how you solved it. That immediately steps up the rigor because they do have to get into the thinking behind the numbers. And I'd rather have 5 where they have to explain their thinking than 25. And I'll have teachers who say to me, but I really need to give them like 15 problems. That's fine. Choose 4 of them where they have to explain their answer. So you're not having to grade 15 like that, but you are pushing them to explain their answer. Because any time you push a student to explain or justify, you're kicking up the rigor. And again, let's go back to the low expectation student versus the high expectation student. That's a lot of times what we don't do with the low expectation student. With our student who's thriving, they'll give us a one-word answer, and we'll say, okay, explain that a little bit more. Give me some more details. Tell me why. But with our student who's struggling, again, we're just happy they gave us the one-word answer, so we take it and move on. And instead what we need to do is ask them the same question. Why did you come up with that answer? Well, they go, I don't know. Okay, what we're going to do is I want everybody to get with a partner, or everybody to get in small groups of 3. And I want you to talk about Kaylee's answer. She said this. I want everybody in your groups to talk about why that would be the right answer. Well, Kaylee's also talking in her group. And I can come over there and listen. And if they're on the right track, I'm in good shape. If they're not, I can give them a little bit of guidance. So then we're going to break out of the groups, and I'm going to come back to Kaylee. I'm not going to move on and say, okay, Kaylee, explain your answer a little bit more. So what I'm doing is I'm holding her to those high expectations, but I'm providing her the support to get there. And that's, again, the piece that we lose when we talk about rigor. It's just, we're supposed to have higher expectations. Well, absolutely. But you got to help them get there.
Now, I get that. Earlier about when I go into the classroom, I model for the teachers kind of that, exactly what you just described. I get it. As the principal, and having been trained and so forth, it makes a whole lot of sense to me, and I look for it. But I don't see it a lot from the teachers because teaching in general, I think teachers feel as if they have to do most of the talking, and they're very uncomfortable with now throwing something out to have the students do most of the talking. We call it the heavy lifting. One of the things we're coaching our teachers is try to have the students do more of the heavy lifting. Don't be afraid to let them struggle and figure things out. But I think as teachers, we want them to get the correct answer so badly that we give hints and we give them the answer. Either we have very short wait time for them to come to an answer. What type of strategies do you have to talk about in terms of helping teachers overcome that need to always be doing all of the talking?
Well, the other thing we do is we'll ask a question, and if they're not quick to answer it, we'll answer it for them.
Correct.
So that's the other thing we do. And I actually think some of that is we're uncomfortable with them not feeling successful. But the other piece that I think plays into that is that we feel under a lot of time pressure. We have so much to cover and so little time, I can't really afford to stop and spend this time. A teacher's best friend is pair share. Getting students with a partner to turn and talk, because it gives them the opportunity to process and to think about things. And I'm not saying they have to talk for 10 minutes. I mean, it can be 1 minute. It can be 2 minutes. But giving them that opportunity. Sometimes what we're doing when we're calling on students, and this analogy is going to sound a little funny when I first explain it, but we're asking students to perform before they practice. So, for example, if I just called on one of your teachers and said, stand up and sing the Star Spangled Banner right now, they would probably be really nervous, and they might not do their best job.
Right.
Not unless they happen to be in a choir. It would really throw some of them. Well, that's what we do with students when we're talking and we're reading, and then we ask them a question. Well, they haven't had any time to think about it. They haven't had any time to practice. So what happens is, if I can ask a question and have them talk with a partner, then they're getting a chance to come up with their thoughts, practice it on one person before I'm asking them to share it out. And if my groups are struggling, I can say, okay, now, what we're really looking for is why Clifford the Big Red Dog did this. So let's go back in the story, and here's where we talked about it. Now, I want you to talk to your partner and come up with that answer. So I'm not going to tell them again. I'm just going to guide them to where we had talked about it, so they're coming up with the answer. And so using those strategies, then I can get them to come up with something that they can share out in front of the whole group. Now, the other thing I can do is this. Let's go back to you're my struggling student. And I've called on you, and you've given me that deer in the headlights look, and you haven't come up with an answer at all.
Right.
So I've put everybody in groups of 3. So you're talking to your group. But part of the issue you've got is you're not real confident because you never feel like you get the right answer. And so sometimes you have it, but you don't want to share it because you're worried about it. So what I do is, again, as I'm monitoring the classroom, I come over to your group, and I make sure you're on the right page. And if you're not, I give you a little extra guidance. But what I do is I make sure I hear that your group has the correct answer. So your group has come up with the correct answer. And I look at you and say, now, Mark, I need to call on somebody who can answer this question. And I need them to be right so that I don't look bad. And your group has just come up with the right answer. So if I call on you, can you share that right answer with the group? Well, of course they're going to say yes.
Right.
Because I've guaranteed success. And so little strategies that don't take a lot of time can make a big difference. And that one's really simple, to sort of preload who's going to do your answers and to purposely pick some students you don't normally call on. But a lot of times students are afraid they're going to be wrong.
Right. And see, in terms of, this is where I try to, again, from a coaching perspective with my team members, even if the child does give you a wrong answer, push back and challenge them on the thought process of how they got there. And that's what you were talking about again, about explaining and discussing. Like, okay, help me understand how you got to, talk to me, explain to me your thinking when you got to that answer. And a lot of, again, and it might be because of the time thing, because we, in all honesty, our teachers are overloaded with all the various initiatives and the time pressure, as well as trying to get them to achieve on these various standardized tests. I know they are overwhelmed. But at the same time, if they would put some of these practices that we're talking about into place, they would get the results that we're looking for. Because I've seen it happen when I walk into a classroom and I do it. Exactly what you just read. I've done so no same. I walked into a class the other day. The teacher was round robin reading. and out into groups. They were already segmented into groups, but there was one child reading to the entire class of the groups at a time. I said, stop. have the children within their group, because they were in pods of 4, let them take turns within their 4 reading with each other. And then after a certain amount of time, or when they get to the end of the story, we will have them share out randomly. I balled up 4 pieces of paper, put group numbers on them, and let the teacher pick the group. All right, whichever group we pick out of the hat, that's the group that's going to have to talk first. All right, so within your group, now the other groups, you can chime in if you want, but this group is leading. We went through that. The kids had such a good time, and they were bringing up stuff we hadn't even thought about in the story. But the point is, I had to go in there and do that. It's like no matter how many times we tell it, they still fall back on the old tried and true. And I guess that's one of the questions as well, as we try to push toward rigor, is how do you get them to move away from the old tried and true methods of, say, round robin reading or some of the other things that are kind of like archaic in teaching that may have worked when we were kids, but for a child that has the attention span that they have right now of a gnat, doesn't work?
Well, it's funny that you use round robin reading as your example, and that it works when we were kids. Let me tell you, Mark, the research has been very clear that round robin reading doesn't work. So your teacher's going to hate me if she's listening or he's listening.
That's okay, because I told them the same thing. So go ahead. It's not the first time they've heard it.
Well, I had somebody one time who said, "Well, that must be recent research." The research that shows that round robin reading doesn't work was done in the 1920s. Okay, we've known for a very long time round robin reading doesn't work. I mean, it doesn't work for a couple of reasons. You've only got one who's actually reading.
Right.
They're performing without practicing, and what happens is they read it, and you ask them a comprehension question, even if it's a basic "what color was the dog" question, they can't answer it because they were so busy trying to sound good.
Correct.
They weren't actually comprehending anything of what they read. So we know that we're much better off with choral reading or having them read it silently and then having them do some out loud reading, using reading guides that actually guide them through the reading. There's so many other ways to do that may take a little more time but are definitely more effective. Now, how do you get folks to move? I think that's a real challenge, and it comes down to, in many ways, the leadership, not just the leadership from the principal, from teacher leaders. You've got to be willing to say, we need to change, and here's why.
Right.
So that teachers understand the value of what they're being asked to do. Because when you say, you need to not do this, it goes through a filter with teachers of, are you telling me I'm a bad teacher? And any time you give a recommendation, it goes through that filter. Because if you're telling me to do something different, you're telling me I'm a bad teacher.
Right.
So we have to go with, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that what you're doing is a good start. But can we enhance what you're doing to make it even better? And here's a couple of reasons why. Our test scores, are not as good as they need to be. Are you really seeing the potential in students that you want? For example, are all of your students growing as much as you would like them to be? More than test scores, do you see the growth? And so really getting at the value with teachers, helping them see that value. And then the other thing is helping them feel successful. One of the reasons that teachers do more teacher talk and ultimately retain more control is we feel like we can be successful with that.
Correct.
And what happens if it looks chaotic and my principal comes in and marks me down for not having good classroom management? So there's got to be a real clear understanding that you're there to help them be successful no matter what that takes. And it can be reassuring them about classroom management. In one case I worked with in a middle school, they had hired somebody who was hired under emergency certification in their state.
Yes.
And so he had been a plant manager. And then all of a sudden he's teaching middle school social studies. And he found that, managing little ones, meaning seventh graders, was different than managing adults. And I had recommended a game where you put students in small groups and they're creating their own questions with some guidance. And they were supposed to. The principal said everybody has to try one activity. So he was like, well, I guess I'm going to do this one because I have to do something. And he said, but, you know, I don't think it's going to work. The kids are going to go crazy. I'm really worried about how am I going to put them in 6 groups and manage that. Well, what the principal did, because he recognized that it wasn't just whining to get out of it. It was a real concern. The principal enlisted the help of the curriculum specialist for the school, the assistant principal, and they got 2 parent volunteers. And what they did was they set up what day he wanted to play this questioning game for review, and those people came in and were there to help him manage the group. Now, what happened was that as the day went on, he needed less help. And so after lunch, the 2 parent volunteers were able to go home.
Right.
And when the day was over, he told the curriculum specialist, I can do this next time without help. So what happened was they ensured he felt successful. In another case, in an elementary school, I had given them a graphic organizer to use with math word problems. That's very effective. And they really liked it and felt like it would be great with their kids. And they said, but we can't use it. And I said, what's the problem? And they said, we have a paper allotment, and we don't have enough money to run it all. And if we have the kids drawing it, it's going to take them a half hour to draw it. Well, you know what I did, Mark. I went straight to the principal and said, look, here's the deal. Here's the problem. How are you going to fix it? And he said, I'll run it out of my paper allotment. It's no issue. So, sometimes what keeps us from change is a fear of failure. And I really believe the number one job of leaders is to remove barriers for success.
Absolutely.
Simple things like that can make a difference. Sometimes you've just got to encourage them. I also do a lot more asking than telling.
Right.
So if I do walk into a classroom where, let's say a teacher's using true-false tests, okay, which are not rigorous at all because
right.
There's TF and this funky little letter they hope that give them the benefit of the doubt on. If I talk to a teacher who's using true-false, and I'll say, well, how is it working? Well, my students do okay with it, and it's really easy to grade. Well, let me ask you this. Do you really know if they understand it or not?
Right.
Well, I think so. Well, how do you know? How do you know they're not guessing? Well, I guess maybe I don't.
Absolutely.
Way to make an adjustment so you could still use your true-false test, but make an adjustment so you could really know if they understand it. And it takes you a little more time to grade, but not too much. Would you be okay with that? And they typically will go, yeah, okay, I guess I'm willing to try. I say, here's what you do. Still do true-false, but instead of just taking the trues and falses, if it's false, they have to rewrite it as true so that you can really see if they understand it. Does that okay. So what's happening is I'm not coming in telling them that what they're doing is bad.
Right.
I'm coming in saying, can we make it better? Now, Mark, the reality is a true-false test is not the best test to give for the most part.
Right.
But if that's what you want to do, then I'm not going to tell you no. I'm just going to help you make it more rigorous. And I think when it comes to change, we have to do that. It's not throw out everything you're doing, you're a bad teacher.
Correct.
It's you're doing some good things. My guess is if I came in and did a training with your school, by the end of the day, the teachers would feel a couple of ways. One thing they would go is, boy, we understand rigor better than we thought we did. 2, some rigor. And 3, there's a lot of ways I could do it better.
That's right.
Because every group I train comes out with that.
If you've just joined us, my guest this morning, my esteemed guest is Dr. Barbara R. Blackburn, and we're talking rigor in the classroom and how we can obtain it, how we can work towards it, how we can define it, and what rigor is and what rigor is not. I'm going to share some information with you, but listening audience, you know. And if you're new to the audience, this is what I have them do while I'm sharing, because I need you to, if there is such a thing, because the debate is out there whether or not there is such a thing as multitasking, but I am going to ask you to do more than one thing at one time. I'm going to ask you to listen to the information that I'm sharing and get onto all your social media sites and let someone know that Dr. Blackburn is on the air with me, and we have about somewhere between 40 minutes or more so to go, or whatever time Dr. Blackburn needs to bail out between now and 9 o'clock. So let someone know that she is on the air with me. I'm going to share this information with you, and you do what I ask you to do in terms of doing some promotion, because these are interviews and messages that we all need to hear, particularly, and not just if you are, but particularly if you are an educator.
Paper? Stuck on a difficult writing assignment? Have no fear, the WPU Writing Center is here. The Writing Center can help you form a thesis, edit a paper, or just organize ideas. Feel free to stop by either of our locations. We're at Atrium 128 and Valley Road 3048. For more information, please check out our website at wpunj.edu/Writing Center. Remember, walk-ins are welcome. We look forward to seeing you at the Writing Center.
The cow says,
I love you.
To a child, it's just something else to play with. Lock it up, because 1.7 million children in the U.S. are living with unlocked and loaded guns. Get involved at ceasefireusa.org.
UP 88.
You're listening to The Reading Circle with Marc Medley on Brave New Radio.
Yes, indeed you are. We're in an extended... My guest is Dr. Barbara Blackburn, and we're talking about rigor in the classroom. So, again, let's talk a little bit about what rigor is not. Because I know you have a definition in your book. Actually, I have that posted on one of my electric signboards in the school, the definition of how you define rigor, of what it is and what it is not. It's not a 4-letter word. I know that's the title of one of your books.
Well, you're right. And you'll have to take a picture of your signboard and tweet it to me or email it to me so I can send it out. When I talk about what rigor is, there are 4 parts. There's an environment that supports rigor. There are high expectations, which we've already talked about. There's support, which we've talked about. And then there's student demonstration of learning, because if they don't demonstrate learning, then what use is all the other?
Correct.
Now, when you focus in on that, that means there's a lot of things it's not. So, again, we've talked about it. It's not more. It's not coverage. It's not just for honor students. One of my books is Rigor for Students with Special Needs.
Correct.
Those myths that's out there. Rigor is not your resources. You don't have to have the perfect book or the perfect computer program to do rigor. I mean, you can be rigorous with nothing but a Sears catalog, although I don't think they make those anymore. And I remember in my first job, interview, that was, I loved the principal. He was in the mountains of North Carolina, and he was an Italian from New Jersey. And on work days, he would cook for us. And I just remember I loved him. I had his daughter in my class. But his interview question for me was, you walk into your classroom, and there's been a mistake, and the custodian has moved everything out of the classroom except the desks and a Sears catalog. Tell me how you're going to teach all day. And so that's why I laugh and say that you can teach with anything. You can teach just with yourself and the students.
Right.
And I think sometimes we think, we have to buy this program, or we have to spend money on this. And certainly resources help. Don't hear me say they don't. But I do think we fall into some traps, And certainly, and I've worked for a couple of publishers, so, I saw it inside. A lot of the companies that sell things, they'll slap the word rigor on there, and it may or may not be rigor.
That's correct.
And so, it's the same way with Common Core. You saw all of these things that came out that said they were for the Common Core. And, I would buy books that said they were for the Common Core, and I would read them and go, okay, this is not Common Core.
Right.
This is not hitting at the core of what that should be. And so I think we have to be careful when we assume that it's just about the resources. So it really is about what we do with our expectations and support so that students can show you they understand it. And anything else is peripheral to that. So standards are important because they reflect our high expectations. But standards are not enough without the support. And higher level questions. We know to ask higher level questions. Again, it's okay to ask lower level questions as long as they build at the higher level questions. But here's the other thing. You walk into a classroom and your teachers are asking higher order questions and you check it off. Well, guess what? If the student gives a low level response to that and the teacher accepts it, that's not rigor.
I'm glad you brought that up.
I don't care if they ask a higher order question, if the students don't answer appropriately.
I'm glad you brought that up because that's a piece of the puzzle as well. And that's another thing as we walk through that we look for to see, well, how did the student respond? And you're right. In terms of, okay, you could ask all the higher order thinking questions you want, but if the student is still giving you a lower level answer, we still haven't achieved our objective.
Right. And, you talked earlier, you mentioned Bloom's taxonomy. And, certainly what we use for the most part is Bloom's to think about, what is high level versus low level. But I certainly write about some other models in my book. And I do that partly because I think there are some limitations to Bloom's. And the biggest challenge is that for most teachers, what we pay attention to in Bloom's is the verbs.
Right.
And so it's very verb dependent. So let's take a verb like create. On Bloom's taxonomy, that is a very high level task to create something. Well, I was doing walkthroughs with a principal, and we got to one classroom, and she told me, she said, oh, this teacher is so excited you're coming in. The teacher says that they've got a very rigorous lesson plan, so let's go in and see what they're doing. Well, we went in, and the students were creating. They were creating get well cards for a sick classmate.
Right.
Well, that's not high level.
Right.
And so verbs can be deceptive. And so I probably give 6 or 7 tools in the toolkit, but the one that really I use when I'm working with teachers is Webb's depth of knowledge. And certainly the Common Core is partly based on that, so it's integrated in.
Right.
But it's been around for a good number of years. But what I like about Webb's is, in his 4 levels, he focuses on depth and complexity. So it's not just the verb. It's not just what you ask students to do, but it's what they're doing in terms of depth and complexity. Now, a caution I would give you is that if you Google Webb's depth of knowledge, this very nice circle diagram comes up that's divided into 4 parts, and it has verbs for Webb's depth of knowledge. When I was writing this book, I contacted Dr. Webb to see about putting it in the book. Within an hour, Mark, I got a response from his grad assistant, and then I heard from Dr. Webb the next day saying, Dr. Webb did not create this. He does not endorse it. It does not reflect his work. It's the same problem as Bloom's then. You get down to the verbs. So what you really need to do is look at his definitions and see what they really mean, because it's things like level 1 is basic recall, and it's simple questions.
Right.
And it's retelling things. But it also is something that only takes 1 step to accomplish. As you move to level 2, then what you're doing is looking at the skills and concepts. So you're comparing and contrasting. You're making inferences. It takes more than 1 step. And levels 1 and 2 are important. You have to do those to get to levels 3 and 4. But levels 1 and 2 are not considered rigorous. So you really want to get to level 3 for rigor, which is the strategic thinking. And these are things like the high levels of analysis, moving beyond application and inference to truly thinking at a higher level. It's things that have multiple possible responses. It's understanding the text, whether that's a story or a picture or a problem in math, moving beyond the text so you demonstrate you understand the text, but you also go beyond the text.
Right.
It's providing evidence and justification. And those kinds of things are where you want rigor. And I just had, yesterday I was down in Charleston, South Carolina, working with a group doing a train the trainer model. And one of them said, well, can kindergarten students do those higher levels? And I said, absolutely. With a kindergarten student, they give you an answer and you say why.
Right.
And they give you a half answer and you say why again.
Right.
And that's pushing for justification. That looks different than an 11th grader who you're pushing for with justification, but you're still doing the same thing. So I find that Webb's depth of knowledge is extremely, extremely important. But again, the challenge is don't go for that verb wheel. A lot of what's out there on the internet is not as in-depth as his definitions. And actually, anybody can get to me through my website. They can send me emails. And, you know, if you're struggling with finding it, email me through my website, and I'll send you a link. But I think it's really important, and you've seen in my book, it breaks it down.
Right, that's correct.
It's really important to look at those levels because most teachers, and again, this happened yesterday, it's very typical, it happens in most workshops I do, they think, for example, if a student, let's say a student reads a story, and the assignment is for them to write a new ending to the story, they think that's rigorous. Well, it's more rigorous than some other things, but here's the thing. They're still basically taking what's in the story and applying it.
Correct.
That's level 2. That's not level 3. So level 3 would be more like take the story, rewrite it from a different perspective, and write your justification for why the perspective was different. So that's going to be more of a level 3. And so that's an entirely different leap than just write a new ending to the story. So a lot of times what we think is rigorous isn't.
Correct. And there... But Mr. Medley, that was rigorous. And then whenever you break it down like you just did, then it fosters other discussion. But it's interesting you brought up the point a couple of minutes ago about resources. Because in 2015, we have more resources. I mean, I cannot think of a better time to be a teacher or a student from a resource perspective. And other day I was sharing with a teacher, he was teaching essay, and the children were having a hard time defining for me what an essay is. Whenever I went into the classroom, I asked the child, well, what do you learn about? They said, writing an essay. I said, what's an essay? Community. Okay, no, you're writing an essay about your community, but the essay itself is not community. Okay, what's an essay to the next child? It's a test. Like, no, an essay is not a test. So, I mean, it was like I was getting all these crazy cornball answers. So whenever I got the teacher into the office, I said, did you ever define what an essay is? Because I noticed you were going through the diagrams and the, 3-column this and this and that, but did you ever define for them what it is? And he says, no. I said, well, okay. I was at my desk and I went to the computer and just put in Google sample essays, 3rd grade sample essays. And so many things popped up in terms of sample, the definition of essays, so forth. He said, I never thought. And these are teachers that have smart boards, that have projectors on the screens. He said, I could have. So from a with the Sears Roebuck book and You and the Kid, we have so many resources now, and yet we still have folks that don't think to maximize them.
Yeah, and again, I think there's a couple of reasons for that. One is I think that teachers are very overwhelmed.
I agree.
I think with everything they're expected to do, just having time to pause and reflect on what would work best sometimes is a real challenge. And frankly, I think sometimes they're so tired.
And, hey, we're trying to make the sale, so we're going to make this product look as if it can, do wonders. Talk about learning by osmosis. But, and really all of them can't, but yet we keep buying them and keep putting them on the teachers. And so I could not agree with you more.
And the reality, Mark, the reality is there is no magic bullet.
Correct.
There is no magic potion. If there was, we would all be using it. What it boils down to is if there's a magic bullet, it's that it's good teaching.
Right.
It's a good teacher with students doing their best. And I believe we have lots of good teachers out there.
Correct.
I meet just hundreds of really good teachers, but they could all be better if they had a little bit more time, a little bit more support in terms of working together.
Correct.
And really be able to plan. If I was in charge of the world, okay, if I was in charge of the world and had a magic wand, I would give every Friday to teachers as a planning day so that they would teach Monday through Thursday.
Wow,
and Friday would be an entire day where they could plan with other teachers, they could work on their plan. Can you imagine if teachers actually had a full day to plan for each week what they could do?
That would be awesome. That would be awesome. But see,
I'm
again,
not in charge of the world. Yeah,
but again, and see, and if I I have with education in general is that, that type of thinking makes some sense in a 2015, but we have gone through various ages. We've gone through agricultural, industrial, technological, so forth and so on and so on. But we're still doing business like back in the agricultural age. All of our scheduling is still built around farming. It's still the summers off, the 8 to 3, the so forth and so on. That has not changed since school began. We're still working under the old factory bell system. And so changing across the board, education across the board, and with ideas such as the one that you just gave, really would help us to be able to improve in a 2015.
Right. And it's just amazing. Teachers are always like, oh my gosh. Because they can't even imagine having that kind of planning time. But, there's all these comparisons internationally. But one of the things, when you really look at some of the other countries, particularly those that rank very high, their teachers have more time to work together and to plan. It's not necessarily a day like what I described.
Right.
But they do get more regular time to work with other teachers, during the week. And I do think that's a problem we have. And it's a resource challenge, but I think that's one of the things, if we're going to look at improving education, we've got to figure out how teachers can have more time to truly reflect and plan their teaching, because nothing works, whether it's rigor or differentiation or anything else, nothing works if it's not planned. You can't just do it off the cuff. I've been presenting on rigor for 15 years. Off the cuff. I do it more off the cuff than I used to, but I still plan. I still have a plan every time I go in the door. And if I don't take the time to plan and to adjust, then I'm doing a disservice to my students who happen to be teachers and principals.
Absolutely. I could not agree with you more. We're going to share some more information with the listening audience. Don't you dare move. Get on all your social media sites and let them know that we have about 20 minutes left. And hopefully no one, unfortunately, missed the first hour and 10 minutes that they've been with us. Actually, I hope you've been with me since 6, because it has been an educational morning. I dubbed it as Educational Saturday, and it is living up to its dubbing. It is living up to its name. It is Education Saturday. We talked about poverty in the first hour and a half, and we're talking rigor in the second hour and a half. So don't you dare move. Stay right there as I share this information with you.
How can I make money in the music business? Why copyright?
Should I make a CD anymore?
Trying to break into the music and entertainment biz? Wondering how the business works? Wondering how guys like Elton John and MC Hammer go bankrupt?
Why am
I not making any cash?
Tune in to WP Brave New Radio every Wednesday night at 8 o'clock. Hang with the university's music business faculty hosts, me, Steve Marconi.
And me, Dave Phil. Plus, we'll have industry guests and students from the music management program.
How do I get gigs down at the shore?
Call in with your questions and hear the latest in industry happenings.
How do I get my music on iTunes?
How do I get on a tour?
It's Music Biz 101 and more every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Only on WP Brave New Radio.
Your secretary's got our checks, right?
Mine's direct deposit, I think.
Hey, it's me, DJ Hyun,
the host of Groove With Me. Every week, I will play you a tasty playlist focusing on a genre or theme. Groove With Me, every Sunday at 1 o'clock, right here on Brave New Radio.
Want to expand your horizons? Want to broaden your mind? Well, listen to the only show of its kind. Listen to The Reading Circle.
We bring you what's going on in the world of reading, in the world of books. Sometimes the book may be from 20, 30 years ago, because the thing about books, they are timeless, particularly if there's a good message. And then there are times when we do books that are hot off the press, that were just released.
Listen to The Reading Circle every Saturday morning from 6 a.m.
The Reading Circle with your host, Marc Medley.
Only on WP 88.7 FM.
You're listening to The Reading Circle with Marc Medley on Brave New Radio.
Yes, indeed you are, and you've been listening to the Reading Circle since 6 o'clock this morning. We've had almost 3 hours of the Reading Circle, and it has been a power-packed 3 hours indeed. So, Barbara, as we now work our way near the end, and in most of our states, all of us have these high-stakes testing, these high-stakes assessments. I mean, to the point now where, as a student, all they're really being is tested. I mean, we have, in our district, we have benchmark testing, the unit testing. We have the online testing of a program that we bought. Then, of course, we have now what used to be New Jersey Ask is now PARC, which I believe, many of the states has adopted. How do we now, because I don't know if it was you or somebody I was talking to at one point, we were talking about, seemed like we're moving away from love of learning to fear of learning. And the same thing with teaching. We're kind of moving away from love of teaching to almost fear of teaching. Someone texted me yesterday and said, you know what, my passion for education is leaving, and it's not because of the kids, it's not because of the parents, it's not because of it, other than this constant pressure with testing. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that's a huge challenge in schools today, too. I'd probably put it a second, right after the not having time to work with everybody else. I think in the public's zeal to want proof that kids were learning, which is not necessarily a bad thing. I don't have a problem with accountability.
Right, I don't either.
But I think in the zeal for that, there were some unintended consequences. And the sheer amount of testing and the pressure it puts on students and teachers, I don't think anybody anticipated that. I mean, I think that's partly why with the rewrite of No Child Left Behind that has just passed the House and the Senate,
right.
it includes a decrease of testing. I believe that's part of the pushback. When I was teaching in North Carolina years ago, more years than I would like to count, I taught in a system of standardized testing for promotion. North Carolina decided to use the California Achievement Test, which tells you how long ago it was, for promotion. And this was long before No Child Left Behind.
Right.
They actually followed Texas, which was already using standardized testing for promotion. And I was teaching, at that point in time, I was teaching 8th graders, which was a benchmark year. So they couldn't be promoted if they didn't score the cutoff. Now, I was also teaching in a track system where we had advanced, regular, and what we call developmental. And I was teaching developmental students, which meant they were below the cutoff to start with. So they're below the cutoff. They've got to score the cutoff to be promoted to 9th grade. And it was the same year they renormed the test. So even if kids held their own, their scores were going to go down. And there was a lot of pressure with that. And I was still young enough and naive enough, I just explained it to the kids.
Right.
Well, here's the deal. And I remember one of them said, well, can't you call the governor and get him to delay this for like a year? And I just laughed because I thought they clearly think I have more power than I have. And, you know, so we have to deal with this. And our principal, who I loved dearly, had bought all of us this resource kit, and it was these 3 huge notebooks of test prep that you were supposed to do every day. Well, you know, it was awful. It really was. And what I remember thinking was, if I do this all the time, I'm going to turn my kids off, and I'm doing
That's right.
motivated. And so what I told the kids, I showed them the notebooks, and it scared them. And I said, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to teach you the standards, and I'm going to do the absolute best I can, and you're going to need to do your absolute best. And we're going to do some of these notebooks because it's not fair for me to never do multiple choice, and then all of a sudden you have to take multiple choice on a test.
Right.
So I'm going to make sure you're prepared for the test. Well, so I taught that year, and I did that. I did my best with the standards, and I taught probably a third of what was in those notebooks. I used about a third of it because they were standard test-taking practice.
Correct.
In the principal's office, and as I was walking up to his office, I thought, oh my gosh, I so know what has happened. The test scores have come back. I only did a third of those notebooks. My kids have failed, and I'm in such trouble. So I got up to the office, and Mr. Wilson was in there, and he had hired me. He was a new principal the year he hired me, and this is like my 3rd year, so I'm up for tenure too. And we sat down, and he said, you know, Miss Blackburn, do you know why I called you in? And I said, no, but now before you say anything, I want you to know that I love my job, and I love working for you. And, you know, he's a very serious man.
Right.
He says, well, that's fine, but, you know, we really need to talk about, and I stopped him, and I said, you know, Mr. Wilson, before we go any further, I don't know if you know this, but you know you gave me these developmental students because nobody else wanted them, and I love teaching them. And I don't know if you know this, but when we had the North Carolina history contest from the state this year, my students took 3rd place after the 2 advanced classes. So I want you to know we're really doing some good things. And he said, well, that's all good, but we really need to talk about your test scores. And, you know, I said, well, you know, Mr. Wilson, and I pulled out my ace in the hole. I said, I really do love working with you and working with these kids. You know, if you need me to, I'll coach cheerleading next year. And, you know, he's just like, no. But, I mean, you know, I wanted to keep doing what I was doing, and I was really worried. And he said, no, really need to talk about your test scores. I want you to tell me what you did.
Right.
So I confessed the whole thing. You know, I confessed that I'd focused on the standards and that I'd only done a third of the test prep. And I'm like, okay, I'm fired. Okay, you like what I did. No, I just wondered. You know, because the other teacher, out of her 22, all but 5 have to take the test. And out of your 44, all but 5 passed the test. So whatever you did worked. I just wanted to know what it was. Now, I think even though the pressure is more now, I still think the same principle applies. We have to do our very best to teach the standards.
Correct.
That's what the test tests. And we have to do enough preparation for the test so that students aren't surprised when they get there. They need to be prepared for the length of the items. They need to be prepared for the type of the items.
Correct.
Certainly key vocabulary you can teach.
Correct.
But at some point as a teacher, you have to say, all right, I know testing's important and I'm going to pay attention to it, but I'm not going to obsess over it. And it's a choice you make. And I think it's really hard. In fact, in my newest book, I just revised classroom instruction from A to Z, and I have a whole chapter on this because it's such a pressure piece for teachers. Now, I also think that leaders need to do their part to try to say, yes, test scores are important, but remember, we're also here for the kids. And leaders won't. You can't really boil problem solving down to multiple choice tests.
Right.
And so you've got to really keep that broader focus. And I do understand, for every teacher that's listening to me, I do understand the pressure. And I do understand that now test scores are being used to evaluate you.
Correct.
And they're the way they're used. If you want to use it for a small portion, I can live with that. But this notion that it's half your evaluation, I'm not a fan of.
Same here.
I think that's how tests were designed to be used. And I would say pay attention to what the test is telling you, because sometimes it can tell you about the kids. Sometimes it can tell you about you. I know that for me, one thing was I found certain standards that I wasn't teaching as well as I thought I was. So using that data helped me be a better teacher the next year.
Well,
but I encourage teachers to say you are in a stressful situation, and you do things that nobody else would be willing to do. You take a chance that you're willing to come in and risk everything to make a difference with other people's children, and you are doing a good job. And please, to the extent that you can, don't beat up on yourself. You got enough other people beating up on you.
Absolutely.
Chances are all those students who grow into apple trees, they're not going to come back and tell you about it.
That's right.
But you got to know and trust that if you're doing your best, that's going to have to be good enough.
Absolutely. And it was interesting the way you put that in terms of teaching the standards versus teaching the test, because many times we get hit with, well, all you teachers now do is teach to the test. But there's a difference between teaching the standards and teaching the test. And I'm glad you made that differentiation. And also, I'm glad to hear you say, teachers, please stop beating up on yourselves. Because, again, as I shared with Dr. Payne, I close all of my staff meetings with teachers make every other profession possible. There is no profession, I don't care if he's president, I don't care if he's astrophysicist, astronaut, scientist, I don't care what your profession is, somewhere along the way you had a teacher. So teachers make every other profession possible.
And he greets his teachers every morning with this statement. He says, on your worst day, you are someone's best hope. Now, but I don't totally agree with it.
All right.
I think on your worst day, on the day where your kids got up late and breakfast burned, and your shirt got a stain on it, and you came in and the copier wasn't working, I don't know that we are somebody's best hope. You got to wait for the kicker. On that worst day, on the day that nothing went right, you're somebody's best hope. You're probably, for one of your kids, their only hope.
Correct.
And I think we really need to remember the positive power we have, even in the midst of all the negativity.
Absolutely. We're down to the last couple of minutes of the interview. This is the opportunity for you to promote. You can say anything with the exception of a dollar amount, but in terms of your workshops, your conferences, your books, your websites, this is your opportunity to share that with the listening audience of how they can get in touch with you. And before we even do that, I thank you so much for the rescheduling. I know the last time we had the technical difficulties and you were happy and willing enough to do a rescheduled date, and I'm so glad as it worked out it was this morning. But again, I thank you for rising early, and this is your opportunity to promote.
Well, that's great, and I do appreciate you having me on the show. Well, folks can get in touch with me through my website. It's barbarablackburnonline.com, or you can Google me, put in Barbara Blackburn and Rigor. And I would tell you the website is your first and best resource. There are over 100 free resources on there, articles, videos, activity templates to use with kids, podcasts I've done, all kinds of things. And you have copyright permission to use all of them, and you don't have to register. So that's where to go, is barbarablackburnonline.com. You can also contact me through that. There's information on all of my books. I have 15 books, 6 on rigor. One of my new ones from last year was Motivating Struggling Learners, 10 Strategies to Build Student Success. So there's information on all of those, and it links you over to my publisher, or you can find them on Amazon. I also do workshops all the time with schools and districts, and so if you're interested in that, I do them on site. I do them via Skype or webinars, so lots of different options. So you can contact me through my website on any of that. And certainly, I'd also love to hear from you if you just got any feedback on today's interview.
All right, well, my DJ that follows me, he's in the wings. Barry's there in the lobby, so we're going to transition over. But again, Barbara, I cannot thank you enough. This last hour and a half has been inspirational, educational, informational, and inspirational for me. And I hope it has been the same for those in the listening audience. And I hope the entire morning has been that, particularly for our educators in the audience. And you have two contacts that you can get in contact with. They're willing to come to your school. Barbara's willing to come out, as she said, in various methods, whether it's Skype or whether it's in person. Do contact her. There are a lot of free, F-R-E-E, that's the $1 amount we can say on the air. There are a lot of free resources on her site. Do go there. That's barbarablackburn.com, correct?
Well, and for all your listeners, thank you again for your time, and I just hope you have a blessed holiday season.
Thank you, and same to you. Take care now.
Bye.
Well, that ends a doubleheader of the Reading Circle, and it came through just as I envisioned it. I allotted an hour and a half for each guest. Dr. Payne was with me from 6 to 7:30, and Dr. Blackburn was with me from 7:30 to 9. And we're about to close out. May you live as long as you want and not want as long as you live. I was on Facebook while I was conducting the interviews, because I'm on the social media while I'm still talking to you on the air. And two people I know passed away, and I had no idea they were gone. One of them is being funeralized this morning. I'm actually going to stop through the viewing on my way home, but it was a childhood friend. Went to the same church as kids. I did not know she had passed away until I saw her daughter's posting of the program from the funeral on Facebook. So I'm going to stop through there and see her, but I had no idea Sonia Dixon had passed away. And then I just saw another young lady that I know that was posted that she passed away. The details of her funeral are pending. So, again, may you live as long as you want and not want as long as you live. Live be. Have a wonderfully blessed week, and we'll be together again, God willing, next Saturday morning.
WPSC-FM 88.7, Wayne, New Jersey.
Part of the William Patterson Broadcast Network. Brave New Radio.
Brave New Radio. Give us your tired, your poor, your hungry, your rockers, your punks, your freaks, your geeks, your Greeks, your party animals, your gangsters, your commuters, your residents, your students, your alums, your lawyers, your truckers, your calls, your tweets. And we'll give you rock, classic, indie, punk, alternative, easy, hard, raps, rhymes, mixes, and drops. We'll give you kick-ass music because we're WPSC 88.